All right. Hello, everyone. You should be able to hear and see us. Please let me know how everyone's volume is. I've got three lovely ladies here with me today, and I just want to make sure you guys can hear them clearly. So let me know if at all you can't hear them. I will do whatever it needs to be done. Can you guys actually do a little like hi, group hi, and let me see how your audios come out?
Hi.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay, perfect.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Let me know, you guys, how their audio is just so I can make sure everyone can hear them. Okay, with that said, hello everyone. My name is Brittany Simon. This is the official first panel that I've ever hosted or been honored to host. So thank you, ladies, for giving me that responsibility. I feel really nervous and excited about it. We chose a really good subject today, and I am stoked to talk to you about it. I think we all are the perfect candidates to discuss it today. We'll be discussing kink and fetish, healthy or unhealthy. So, when are these activities healthy and when are they not? And then we'll just dive into anything that ends up coming up. We're conversing, we are not debating. We are here to share our ideas and give each other hopefully some tools today. Now, you guys know who I am, so I won't bother introducing myself. But, Madam Genevieve, can we start with you? Introduce yourself, let people know who you are.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. I am Madam Genevieve. I do stream on Twitch at Madam Genevieve. And the best place to probably find me right now is on Twitter, where I am at Madam Genevieve with an underscore in between Madam and Genevieve. But the reason that I'm stoked to be here today is that I have been studying and fascinated with human sexuality for my entire adult life. I am a current in-person and online sex worker. I do sex education, and I just love talking about all things kink and fetish, and stoked to get to know these ladies and maybe answer some audience questions if possible. We'll see how it goes, but I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. Harmony, let us know who we are or who you are.
Hey, I'm Amy. I am also an online and in-person sex worker. I'm kind of in the Brittany bubble a little bit, trying to see if I want to branch out on my own. You can find my Twitter, which I think has been linked, and that's kind of like my professional stuff. And other than that, I'm just kind of a all around. Like I like to think, I like to discuss concepts and topics, and happy to be here.
Wonderful. And Arena, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name's Arena. Super excited to be here with these ladies. I wanted to discuss this topic because I, ever since I can remember, have been fascinated with the world of BDSM and kink. I am a casual practitioner, never really been to a dungeon or anything like that, but it is something that I think about a lot. I am also a student of biology. That was actually what I studied in school, so I really like looking at things from that perspective.
Love it. And I guess I should say that I am 13 years into the kink lifestyle, the BDSM lifestyle. And so I definitely have been obsessed with like reading the books and being involved in the community. I've been to like, Kink Fest and Folsom and all these events. And now that I'm in Europe, I'm kind of hoping to do some events out here. So we'll see what ends up being accessible to me. So I'm very stoked to have everybody here. I'm excited to have the conversation. And I thought we would start actually with defining how we relate to the words kink and fetish, because I have a very specific relation to those words. So I guess I'll start off and then I'll throw it at you girls. Sound good? Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
So the way I think of kink for myself is kink is something that like turns me on, gets me going, exciting, spicy. And then if a fetish is something from my understanding that you traditionally need in order to finish. And so for me, when I think about my life and I really introspect, I think that I really don't have a fetish, but I'm pretty sure I've got like hundreds of kinks at this point, and I'm getting new ones every day. So very exciting. But I don't actually relate with their word fetish very much, which is interesting because every time we have this conversation with people or I hear people having it, they usually do bring up that word fetish pretty casually. And that hasn't been my experience with it. So, what do you guys think? Speak up. I'm not going to point to you. I want us to have a free flowing conversation.
I was gonna say, so I relate to your definition, and in fact, this is something, and Harmony and Madame Genevieve, correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, I think that fetish is synonymous with paraphilia,
Mm.
which is, you need this thing, you are sexually dependent on this thing that is outside of what we can call normal human sexuality. Whereas, like you mentioned, kink is something that I think most people have kinks and might call them fetishes. Most people probably have a foot kink, not a
Mhm.
foot fetish, or rather,
Yes.
most people that are within the foot fetish world, so to
Mhm.
speak. And what's also interesting is it's actually kind of difficult to find statistics on how many people have an actual fetish or paraphilia. I tried to like do some Googling, and I found something like it's usually men who have fetishes versus kinks. I think is kind of evenly split. And sorry, background noise. And I found some statistics online that there are anywhere from like 3% of men have fetishes to like 40, something ridiculous like 40, which I think is like probably not the case.
I think that a lot of people do use the words interchangeably, just in like general vernacular and conversation. And I think, especially when we're having a conversation like this, or if you are somebody who's looking to delve a bit deeper into the lifestyle, that it is important to clarify for the casual user, when I'm doing, just general conversations with people. If they say fetish, I don't always assume that they're meaning it in its literal way, but absolutely, I think most people, the majority, all of us have kinks. That's just a black and white fact, right? And myself, similar to you, Brittany, I don't actually have any fetishes that I'm aware of to this point. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that could stand to change. If anything, I do get bored easily in all aspects of my life, so like novelty could be something for me. Like I really enjoy exploring other people's kinks and fetishes and just like trying it on for size, seeing how that goes. I like the experience. I get very turned on by the experience of newness and just out of the ordinary. So that would probably be the closest thing to fetish for me, but at that point it's still not required. Like I could get off without it. So I would identify myself as a highly kinky person in that regard.
Yeah, I think the definitions that you put forth sound good to me, and I definitely agree with Genevieve that like a lot of like normies kind of use the word fetish when they mean kink, and I usually just translate what I hear them saying and not necessarily the word itself. And I think kinks are definitely, everyone has them, especially if you think the definition is that it's just like an unusual like sexual like focus or something like that. Then it just becomes like, to borrow Brittany's language, a bubble thing, really, like depending on what's normal in your bubble. Like for me, in my bubble, there's a lot of things that are considered maybe kinks that are just completely normal to me because I see them all the time in my work. Like yeah, a lot of different things. So
Well, that begs the question then, like, what is vanilla? And funny enough, I heard someone say, "Oh, vanilla has become so kinky. Like, what is even kinky?" And I'm like, "Wait, are the vanillas kinky now?" And maybe they are. Like, I don't know. I haven't dated vanilla in a bit, and I haven't been around. I guess I haven't talked to my vanilla friends about this, but I don't know. I think kink is so specific to my brain. How would we even define the differences at this point in modern world? Like, how would you define vanilla versus kink right now?
It's tough because a lot of people who really are vanilla are curious about and want to maybe like dip a toe into like not stepping outside their full vanilla flavor identity, but like maybe they're gonna add some sprinkles on top or something. And I work part-time in an adult store, and I get people who come in and feel like, they're really stepping outside the box and trying something crazy and wild. And, I'm thinking, wow, that is super tame, but good on you for stepping outside your
Yeah.
your
We all
comfort
start
zone
somewhere.
and starting this journey. We all have to start somewhere. So like there are people who believe that like using any kind of vibrating toy, just your standard bullet type situation is kinky and outside the realm of vanilla. And I mean, we all know that the majority of vulva owners don't orgasm just from penetration. So sometimes having like a vibrating toy is in my opinion, that's very normal and that's very tame. But
Mhm.
for some people, that might feel wild, and for them it is, and that's cool. And I love that and
Yeah.
encourage that for them. But it's still vanilla to the it's still vanilla in my book.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I keep my vibrator like to the side of my bed. Like it's normal. Like I had to put it away the other day because my father-in-law was coming over and I was like, oh my gosh, like this thing that I just normally keep out because I don't think about it that much. I was like,
It's
hide this
just like
stuff.
part of the
It's just part of the,
life
yeah.
routine.
It's just
Like
like,
I
it's
got
just something that
a
stays
phone
there.
charger, I got a chapstick.
Yeah.
Hide the dildos, lingerie.
Literally.
I was
My
gonna
guest
say,
room.
oh, sorry.
So sorry. My guest room is my office, and I literally have like whips and gags hanging on the walls. And depending on which guest is coming over, I'm like, I guess I should probably like
Yeah.
put those in a drawer or something.
I was gonna say it's interesting to me what is considered vanilla versus kinky because I think especially ever since 50 Shades became like a thing, so many
Yeah.
people are casually like into choking or like impact play,
Mhm.
but like without the considerations of the safety that you would need to be aware of. And then another interesting thing on the other side of that is something that I do think is kind of vanilla and very normal is like, pegging a man or, stuff like that. I don't think that anal play is inherently kinky. Whereas I think for some people, they might put it under that definition.
Fair.
But
Fair.
God put G-spot in a man's ass for a reason. So
No, that's okay. Broad City did that whole pegging scene. Everybody was like, the whole episode was like this big deal in a lot of circles where I remember people saying like, oh, I can't believe Broad City is like bringing out pegging like it's normal. And I'm sitting here thinking, if so many vanilla men I do know, like they do buy toys, they do participate in that kind of activity. They do think about their own, they want to finish too and unique in adventurous ways that they don't even need to qualify as kinky to enjoy it, right? So I think that's really, I would also put pegging, I think, in a more vanilla space as well. But it could be, depending on how it's done, maybe kinky.
Yeah, that is so common in my bubble. Like so common. But like I still meet a lot of people who are really interested in exploring that and they've never done it and they do kind of have some maybe a little shame around it or something. Yeah. And that's to me
It's still a bit taboo.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that kind of work. I like getting the mental in with the actual kink, like what's going on there, and that's like work through that.
Okay, well, this perfectly coincides with this idea of matching it up to the shame idea, which could translate to maybe feeling unhealthy, or maybe people are thinking, oh my God, I have this sick thought. I want to be pegged. And I'm sitting here like, girl, like, okay, how's it sick to want to come, in a way you want to come? But like, that begs the question of how do you know when you're having a healthy relationship with kink or fetish? And how do you know when you're having not so much a healthy relationship with it? How do you guys tell?
Well, for me, I do the way I think about it is in like world opening, like widening, or world narrowing. So if a kink is like expanding my worldview, expanding my life, like making it bigger, better, then that is like, yeah, that's good.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Making me like zero in on it, and I can't, like, it's almost like an addiction. It's like a reciprocal.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me when it's crossing the line into unhealthy. And you really, it's to me, that's the reason that it's hard to like put like a broad prescription on where that is, because it's such an individual relationship. So that's another like nuanced and maybe somewhat difficult to deal with thing, at least for me as a professional, like, and concerning the people that I work with and my clients and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's a question that when I was first getting into Twitch politics and I was open with the public that I was a sex worker, I got a lot of questions from people around like engaging in it in a non-healthy way, et cetera, et cetera. And I tried to express that, obviously everybody's experience of a situation, of a kink, of a fetish is going to be very personalized, right? And I love the way that you explained the world broadening versus closing. I didn't have that really great word set to define it, but I was trying to kind of use that same sort of a concept where you can tell generally if you are in this world in a professional sense, you can kind of get an impression if somebody's starting to have an unhealthy relationship with it, because it does become an obsession, an addiction of sorts. And the energy of the dynamic kind of changes at that point. And for me, that's a boundary where no amount of financial gain or professional acclaim is worth my ethics if I feel that somebody is engaging in it in a way that's going to be unhealthy for them, even
you
if that's
saying-
just my perspective.
But are you saying you're willing to turn down money if it's not like an ethical vibe?
Yeah, I have and I will for sure. And I know I'm so fortunate to be in a situation to do that
Of
not
course.
everybody can. But in my current circumstance, absolutely yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
Like
I was
such a
gonna say, oh, sorry.
oh no, sorry, Irina. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was gonna say, that is an interesting way to look at it, like when it becomes an addiction. But I also think about what type of kink and whether it can indicate what state of mind or what part of the journey a person is in at that moment. So, for example, this is something that I've observed. I've observed, for example, like DDLG, like Daddy Dom, Little Girl. A lot of the
Mhm.
time, particularly the subs in that dynamic, talk about the traumas that they went through and that they are processing through this kink. So I would say that at the moment, usually, so if anyone's seen like somebody who's like, I'm totally didn't have any childhood trauma and I'm the sub in this kink. If anyone knows of any cases like that, please let me know. But it's usually a person that's not in a healthy state of mind that is practicing this particular kink. And I've noticed that as well with any kind of age regression and stuff like that. Usually people almost use that as a type of like self therapizing or self medication in a way.
Yeah, I'll just speak for myself because I don't want to project onto anybody else. But for myself, I think it would be, well, one, I think we're all born into levels of dysfunction, so we all need therapy or some version of it. And I know that for me, I would be, I think, lying if I didn't say as even a young teenager before I even knew BDSM was a real thing, that I didn't read books and escape into this place called BDSM through this lore, usually vampire books, that involve some sort of letting go, right? Like letting go
So
somebody else.
guilty, yes.
Somebody else, please. Like somebody take care of me. Somebody do this thing. I'm so sick of being parentified or being like having to grow up fast or any of these things. And so I think I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't say that BDSM was a great way to challenge my traumas and to face my childhood. Though I will say I was also in therapy for the later part of my kink life. So I was able to see the difference between what is real therapy and what is therapeutic feeling. And so I'll always say like BDSM is therapeutic, but it's not therapy. Just like getting a massage is therapeutic, but it's not therapy. And so we want to make sure that while we're sitting there and facing ourselves, and if you're like me, using BDSM as like this meditation tool, this like opportunity to face yourself, and not all my BDSM is like that, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, like there was a real time in my life when I would find a trauma or I'd find an issue with my brain and I'd say, okay, how do I turn this into a scene? Like, how do I give up control? How do I face like a humiliation scene maybe? Because, my ego's kind of big. So let's talk about like humility. Let's talk about what if, and so I think BDSM is like this really amazing tool and I want people to use it as that. I just don't want them to get lost in the sauce and think that BDSM is going to supply you with all the professional mental health needs that you're like actually starving for.
For sure. I totally love that you use the word tool, because I think that it can be just like so many other things in our life we can use to further our own self-exploration journeys and healing and all of that. But it doesn't negate the fact and the value of professional therapy when appropriate, and really kind of seeking out those resources in addition to your own exploration.
Yeah. I know, like, okay, there was this question that always comes up in relation to this is how do you know it's BDSM and how do you know it's self-harm? Like if you're into needles, I've done lots of needle scenes in my day. I've done needles up and down my thighs. I like it. I would have done more, I think, if I had the opportunity, but it's if you do needles, you should do it safely. Learn how to dispose of them, take classes. I did all kinds of classes, consulted with doctors. I really prepared myself for doing this just because like there's some danger elements to it, right? Risk aware kink. We want to be aware. But as somebody who my self-harm is different. I think some people hear the word self-harm and assume like cutting, but I didn't have that relationship with my self-harm. I had different versions of it. So I know for me, using needles didn't do anything. I have scarification art pieces on my legs as well. And I specify that because again, I didn't do scarring or cutting as a part of my self-harm. So that was also related to the art aspect of BDSM and also giving up control. And I also have tattoos, which also isn't related to trauma, but come on, let's be real, like getting a big back, like a big piece on my back definitely had to relate to my trauma growing up. So again, how do you guys know, like for yourselves, that you're not engaging in behavior that's disguising itself as BDSM when it's really related to self-harm?
I think the
Yeah.
research aspect is a
Yeah.
little bit of a game changer for me because same as you, I put a lot of time and effort into learning about different BDSM practices that I want to participate in, watching other people do it, asking questions versus self-harm feels for me more impulsive. I'm not researching it beforehand. It's just I'm in this situation, I feel really shitty, and I'm going to make a decision that's ultimately harmful for myself, but it's coming from an impulsive place.
I agree. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too. I really think the meditative perspective, being able to pause, research, enjoy, like
Mhm.
you're almost enjoying it versus you're right. The impulse is so much more related to like, I have to do this right now because like I'm losing control and like this is like, yeah,
This is yeah,
Mhm.
it's just more frantic feeling.
absolutely, absolutely. Harmony, were you going to say something?
Well, I just was saying, yeah, it's like the why behind it, but yeah, I like what you guys are saying too. That's definitely
Absolutely.
the feel. And I think honestly, that's the kind of kink that I like. I like kink as a tool for self inquiry. So like the kind
Mhm.
of anyway, I'm already wondering why I feel this way. You know what I mean? So that's how I engage with it in a healthy way.
Have you guys ever gone to therapy because of your kink related stuff?
No.
Negative. No, that's a no for me.
Yeah, have you, because I remember when I was going to therapy, I was in Seattle at the time. I specifically emailed like 80 therapists and I was like, I am in this lifestyle called BDSM and I need you not to assume I'm in this lifestyle because I am traumatized, but also maybe, but also, and then all the like the therapist I ended up going with, who I credit so much of my mental health progression to, she was like, oh yeah, I'm not in the community, but I know what that is. And I know it's really big here in Seattle. So no big deal. We can separate it and I can let you know if there's some overlap there. And I think without a doubt, that was the most reassuring life experience because I had a professional here who did mental health, who was self-aware about or like aware enough about this lifestyle. And then she didn't prejudge me. And instead, she looked at me and said, sometimes these things aren't related, but sometimes it tells you something about yourself with what kind of tool you use to cope or um, I guess heal from your trauma. And I know BDSM for me, it's let me tell you the perks of using BDSM out of everything else. And I know there's a lot of things. You can climb rock, you can work out, you can do yoga, but BDSM gave me structure. It gave me a community and it gave me like consent as the foundation of the interaction. I could negotiate. I had boundaries. People listened to my safe words. The irony is, everybody knows in my 20s I was assaulted and people always go, was that at the dungeon? No, of course not. It can happen at the dungeon, absolutely. But I would say overall, I feel like that's less likely to occur at the dungeon where you usually have to ask consent for even engaging. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I don't want to like not be honest about the spaces, right? Every space has some sort of predator. But I will say I feel safer in BDSM spaces just because consent is generally more pushed and talked about than in vanilla spaces.
And what I noticed with BDSM spaces is they will actually go out of their way, like the members of the community will go out of their way to say, hey, this person isn't safe to play with.
Yes.
So there's constantly posts and updates, and there's like a practice of vetting your play partners, asking for references, which doesn't necessarily happen in the vanilla world, although there are like groups right now, like on Facebook and stuff, like, are we dating the same guy and stuff like that. Yes. And so they'll post,
I
they'll be like,
heard
hey,
about that recently, which hilarious. And that's I love the
Oh
sex
man.
work BDSM adult community so much for
Yes.
those reasons that it does
Mhm.
feel way more respectful, consent informed, just founded in these values that are really important to me than I ever felt outside in the normie world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
And
even,
obviously that's doesn't mean that everybody in the space is always 100%, but in general, I do see a lot better communication, a lot better respect and boundaries, things of those nature.
now, if I can ask, since Harmony and Genevieve, you're both in-life sex workers as well, and I'm an online sex worker, so it's a little different, but you guys have like physical relationships with your clients. Do you guys mind me asking if your, let's say, kink or BDSM related clients, do you guys also see like a consent difference with those clients versus vanilla clients? Do you guys have those like different experiences if you want to share?
So, because I mainly marketed until recently as like a very girl next door type of sex worker, the clients that I would get who were inquiring about BDSM type and kink type stuff were very often kind of boundary pushers anyway, which was the reason they were contacting someone like me, advertising the way that I was, So I kind of had the street school learning of boundaries that way, and I had to learn how to like suss that out. And then eventually that's actually what got me interested in like learning about it, because I wanted to keep myself safe, but I also wanted to keep the clients safe who like wanted me to like dominate them and stuff like that too. So then actually that's where I found Brittany, because I was doing research and you were online at that time doing a lot of like BDSM stuff.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so-
good times.
Yeah, good times. So that's how I kind of like learned by doing it, just because
Yeah.
of my own values. But I'm very amateur, I guess you could say, in that way. But it is interesting because doing in-person sex work is what taught me boundaries. Absolutely. I had to survive. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you learn as you do, for sure. My introduction was a little bit unique because I didn't get into like really being a sex worker and doing stuff in the adult industry until I was in my 30s. I spent my 20s working in a very conservative corporate company. But I had a lot of friends who were professional mistresses, porn stars, escorts, so on and so forth. And I remember being so envious of the authenticness with which they were living their lives, and this just like unapologetic, this is who I am, these are my boundaries, this is what's okay, this is what's not okay, I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior in my life. And I just found that so inspiring that was a major reason why I wanted to, that was one of the major reasons why I wanted to pursue it. To your point though, Harmony, people who are just more like casual observers, or generally men who like think that they want to get into kink exploration, but they haven't taken the time to maybe do any research yet. They just want to like dive right into it. Like, how can I serve you, mistress? Those are generally the worst clients that you can possibly have.
Wholeheartedly agree with you.
Because it's just like you don't I don't even know where to start here. You're like a completely untrained puppy here.
Are they receptive to you guys? Like, what's your, like, are they receptive to you moving them in a healthier direction? You know what I mean?
There's a spectrum of client types when it comes to that.
Okay.
I would say for me, and I think it's because of, how I market myself, but like it is the rare few that like kind of we grow together in a sense, or like that relationship where we're actually like widening our lives.
Yeah.
That there's a select few where that's a possibility, and then there's a big chunk in the middle where it's like they just want the experience, like a hot, like some kind of kink experience that they've always had on their mind, be it role play all the way up to very specific acts. And then there's like another minority down here who are like unhealthy, like aggravating, don't know what they want. You have to kind of like coax it out of them, pretty much do all the work for them.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I see the spectrum of like the different types of clientele that I interact with in that space.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
do
agree,
have a
yeah.
question for all of you lifestylers, actually.
Hmm.
And it is, what kinks do you find overlap? Like, for example, I feel like knife play and blood play probably
Mm.
have like a large overlap, and then blood play and then menstrual blood play probably have a large overlap, and the kinds of people that would veer towards that kind of play. And then needle play, I feel like I've seen a lot of that with CBT, which also coincides with
Mm.
blood play and fluid bonding and stuff like that. And then I think the one thing that probably most kinksters are into is some sort of impact play.
Mm.
But then I also feel like, knife play is very far away from like an ABDL
Mm.
type
Hmm.
situation. So have you
Yeah.
guys, what kinds of
Well, there's
kink bubbles have you guys noticed?
versus like the psychological kinks,
Wait, say that
and
again, Harmony.
the physical kinks like sensations, and
Mm.
versus the psychological.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great point. No, great point. Yeah, I think Arena basically just said that what I would have said. Like, yeah, that's how I observe most of it. Like, I always say I used to be a heavier masochist. Actually, I joked around with my partner the other day because I was like, hey, like, that feels really good, but I got to build up my pain tolerance again because I've been out of it for a while. Like, I haven't been I haven't been hit with a paddle in so long at this point. I'm not sure my booty could handle it. But, like, it's one of those things where even when you're in a certain, like, part of your life where you're like, I'm a heavy masochist for this part of my life, you can move out of it and go explore a totally different kink with a totally different vibe, with a totally different energy, and almost have like a completely big shift in your identity, right? So I personally, my kinks, especially if I relate it to lifestyle, actually represent identity. So I've noticed that with myself, at least. Any
I
thoughts on
think
that?
that's definitely, that can be true for me. Like, I definitely have, my identity is very much centered around being a more dominant personality. I really love teaching, so that's something that comes through a lot. A lot of people get mommy vibes from me. And so that does obviously play into a lot of my dom elements, and I do find myself playing up those personality traits when I'm stepping into that. Like, it's not a different person in any capacity, but it's more of like an embrace of those parts of who I am.
Totally. Totally. Actually, this
On the
kind of.
flip side,
Oh, go
though,
ahead.
like, my submissive side is obviously one that I protect a whole lot more. And so that's one that
Mm.
very few people get to see. Almost never on a professional sense. That one is almost exclusively in my personal life. In order for me to be submissive to somebody professionally, it's got to be a very, very specific dynamic.
Okay, fair. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. That's funny that there are parts of us too that because if I, like in the past, I would have play partners, but then I'd have romantic partners, and there were things I would do with play partners that I would, there were things I would do with romantic partners that I wouldn't just do with play partners, right? Because like it is a vulnerability thing, it's an intimacy thing. There's like so much intimacy involved,
For sure.
Yeah. I actually have a question that kind of coincides with this, but does anyone have anything else to say on that before I kind of move forward? No? Okay, I have this question I wrote down and I thought it was kind of an interesting one. Do we have an obligation to be introspective enough to actually explore the fact that we do have kinks or fetishes? And then if we discover that about ourselves, do we have an obligation to tell anyone, including our partners?
I feel like I
Right.
have a relation to myself, to know myself. And sex is such a, I don't know, it's such a like core part of me, at least it feels like it is. It's like close to like the primal me. I don't know. But yeah, that it's like it is an obligation that I have to myself to understand it. And there's levels of understanding even myself and like unfolding, and I'm always changing. And but as far as like I can't answer that for other people. Like I can't put a broad prescription on like what I think other people should do. And I think that you can have like personal kinks that I don't think you have to tell your partners. Depending on what kind of partnership you have.
Can you give me an example of like what would one of those be? Like, can we think of one? Because that's interesting to me.
I think it depends on, I'm glad you were just saying it depends on what your relationship with that partner is too, right? If
Yeah.
it's very casual, I'm not going to disclose all of all of everything at once, right? I'm going to maybe give little bits and pieces at first, but my primary partner, my fiance, and I have been together for 10 years, and we plan on spending our life together even though we are in an ethically non-monogamous relationship. Our commitment to each other at this point is one where communication is transparent, open, honest. We don't keep secrets from each other. If one of us has a new curiosity or interest, we want to share it with that person, and I want to see him explore it, and he wants to see me explore things. And so in our relationship, that is an obligation, but also like a privilege. I feel really lucky that we've gotten to that point and that we can trust each other enough to share those things.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say similar to what Harmony and Madam Genevieve were saying. Although for me, I found that it wasn't so much an obligation to myself, so much as it was a desire. Like I just wanted
Mhm.
to. But I do feel like if you are planning on cohabitating with, or if the relationship that you are hoping for or searching for is a long-term cohabitation relationship, whether monogamous or not, then you are obligated to be open and honest entirely with your partner, including with your kinks. Um, because I do think that, and you know, we can talk about non-sexual kink as well, but it is such a not, I don't want to say core, but it influences intimacy so much
Mm.
that if you are denying your partner that part of yourself, I don't think that that bodes well for that long-term relationship.
Yeah, I would actually say that for me, you guys often will hear me say like the core parts of Britney. I can't deny it. I think my kink, BDSM, intimacy, the way I express myself, I mean, the way I even like seek comfort, I'm such like a, you know what I mean? Let's be intimate, let's connect, let's physically touch. I would be kind of like a lie if I tried to suppress that. I couldn't even imagine a life where my partner didn't see that part of me. I think I'd feel so alone in my marriage if they couldn't see that I needed some sort of very intentional intimacy. I think often I don't know how other people do it actually, but I know for me I tried to be very intentional. Like sometimes it's spur of the moment and that's great and we're just kind of like not even thinking, but it's hard for me not to like be intentional. Like I'm focusing, I'm paying attention, I'm in this moment, which I think comes from BDSM. Like you have a scene, so you have a beginning and an end to like this moment in time that you've curated and thought, you've been thoughtful about. So I think that for me, I think of intimacy and my BDSM side and all of that stuff as interconnected into such a core part of myself. And so again, super grateful that my partner sees it. I feel really, really lucky because that's such a hard, sometimes you meet the most fantastic person in the world, and if they don't see a part of you, especially when that involves like intimacy in this way, for me, I feel devastated.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I also know other like that there are people who feel much more private, I guess maybe is the word, even like within their relationships. And I don't want to put a judgment, on their perspective. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think when I hear about, the type of relationship that you have, that sounds like Brittany, that sounds like great, like very close, very intimate. And I think some people are happy with, maybe I don't know if shallow is the right word, but like maybe just they connect on a different level.
Yeah,
If that,
yeah. And
uh,
and also like I'm
yeah,
allosexual. I need
yeah,
some version of intimacy in that way to be fair.
yeah,
And there is non-sexual BDSM that also could be like Arena said, like that could facilitate intimacy in a unique way. But I just want to be really close. Like I want to be like close.
yeah. I think that's beautiful. That to
Yeah.
me reminds me of the relationship that I aspire towards, like with myself. Like I'm not
Mm.
there yet, but that to me, I mean, I'm not in a relationship currently, but to me, that's like I don't know, that's the relationship that I am committed to.
Yeah. There's something
Maybe,
very romantic about
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's just like a romantic thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe someday that'll change and I'll be like with the person, But right now
Yeah.
it's like relationship with the self. That's
Yes, girl.
I think that
I,
once you develop that, then you are able to have deeper and more fulfilling relationships with other people
Mhm.
once
Yeah.
that's your foundation, right?
Yeah.
You can give like a pure version of love, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Relationship with yourself, a solid relationship with yourself.
Tying
I
it back to the
feel
question too, like I think I'm so sorry. I'm so
no,
sorry.
no, no, no. You're good. You're good.
The only reason I would say we maybe have an obligation to explore that is because I think it makes us then a better version of ourselves when we are moving around the world.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Arena.
Yes, sorry. I'm just so excited to ask this question because I just thought of it. Do you ladies find, like, I found this in myself, which I will admit is a little hypocritical because I am a little bit of a sadist. I do have some sadistic fantasies, but I'm very, like, wary of people who, as dominants, particularly for impact play, ABDL, and DDLG, who are very, like, not hesitant or don't seem cautious about their relationship with their submissive, if that makes sense. So somebody who is very enthusiastically like, I need me a baby girl, I need you to put on a pacifier and whatever. Like for me, for some reason, it it turns on like a caution area in my brain. And I have like a very like, you know, I don't want to say contentious, but a very biased point of view against dominance like that.
I mean, I think I
Do
would.
you,
Yeah. Go ahead, Genevieve. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that to me feels also like there's a rise in that kind of behavior following the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon, which like on one hand, I like that that series got people thinking about exploring their own sexuality and being more comfortable talking about kinks, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, and the majority of my opinion on the series is that it taught people these really unhealthy ways about proceeding down that path. And now we
Mhm.
see a lot of in real life situations where someone's literally thinking that that's an appropriate way to proceed as a dom, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely not.
Well, the associated trauma so hard. I remember when my vanilla friend came running across the street because I had a room I was renting right across from her home. She was like, Brittany, read this. Is this your lifestyle? Is this what you're doing with your life? And I was like, okay. And I read it and I was like, I feel like this book's mostly about Christian's trauma and how he uses BDSM as a bad coping mechanism for what his mom did to him. But I mean, like some of these words are kind of what I'm doing, but like nothing like this is the lifestyle. This is all just like it's like it's like asking like, "Oh, is this ballet because I put on some slippers?" It's like, "No." Like it feels very like it feels like just a costume, which is fine. So BDSM can be like a costume for a lot of people, or it could be like a lifestyle. For me, I consider it a lifestyle. It's integrated into myself, and it's a requirement of my relationships that I have some sort of level of understanding about it. It's not just something I do like once a year. For me, it's something I think about, right? In the way that I like vibe through the world, tops, bottoms, dominant, submissives. Like how am I moving through the world? But 50 Shades, like you said, Genevieve, it's like it's weird because it put it on the map, but it also, oh my God, it put it on the map. It was like, oh no.
Yeah, it's like I internally groan when I hear people like at the store that I work at, when customers will come in and like the first thing that they say is, have you seen the 50 Shades of Grey movie? And like, I just watched it, and they'll start their like questioning, or they're like, I'm looking for this, or I want to do that because and uh, I love the enthusiasm, I love the curiosity, but I'm like, hold on, can we just back up just a moment and like just
Totally.
reference the fact that like if that's your only exposure, there's other stuff that I would love to introduce you to for, just some research first.
Okay, here's a question. I actually see it in chat. Someone said someone getting off on degradation is not healthy, period. What do you guys think about that? Because obviously I've done humiliation, degradation, that word's really hard for me. Degradation scenes. I've done, that's a whole scene in itself. Brittany can't say a word, talk about humiliation. So for me, I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think it's dangerous to play with such heavy mind fucky games and not be considerate of the aftercare needed, possibly visiting a therapist, possibly visiting a priest. Like, I'm open to it. I'm open to doing tough enough, deep enough BDSM. And again, all BDSM is like deep if you're having a relationship with your kink or whatever. But I want to say that if I'm going to go darker, if I'm going to go more intense, I'm also going to be more cautious about aftercare, the needs we might have. And I just don't think people are doing that. So I think people are engaging in maybe, I don't know what to call it, more hardcore BDSM or kink or even fetish, and then they're not thinking about the consequences. It's like going skydiving and not considering the parachute might not open. Like, think about it.
This is like where you like talk about safe, sane, and consensual.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I am a creative person. I can see a lot of ways for things that seem, in one light, like a complete negative. I can see many ways to switch the frame into it being actually a positive and being a healthy kink. It just depends about the why. There's the kink itself, and maybe a lot of people share a kink, but the why for each of those people is slightly nuancedly different. And
totally.
That's why I can't say definitive statements like this is wrong. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, same.
So is that kind of like the difference between risk-aware kink and safe, sane, consensual? Because if we are safe, then we probably can't do some of the more hardcore CBT scenes. Because with like CBT, you are at some points risking, your fertility. It's physiologically not healthy, I'd say. It's a very, and then there's like blood, fluid exchange that could lead to potential diseases and stuff like that. So I guess it depends on what kind of philosophy you're practicing under. And I will say that even if something is inherently unhealthy, like smoking a cigarette, maybe CBT, or maybe even degradation. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't I don't want to claim like anything in regards to that. But yes, maybe it is unhealthy, and maybe it would be good to be aware of that and kind of fit it into your life in a way such that it doesn't derail it, right? Like sometimes I want to smoke a cigarette or smoke some hookah. It's not healthy, but I would say that overall I do prioritize health.
Yeah.
The health you prioritize too, because sorry, Brittany.
No, go.
Because like if you have like a smoking kink or something, maybe there's some sort of psychological why behind it that is worth like playing out that kink. So it depends on if you're talking psychological health or physical health, and it depends on what people value, I think.
Yeah.
Like what more as
Genevieve?
far as like how they play in kink.
Yeah. I want you to go to Genevieve before I go, because I know we all want to share at the same time.
I was just gonna say you're risk aware when you're smoking that cigarette.
Yeah.
You know that you're doing something that comes with a potential consequence, and you're choosing to do it with that awareness. And I think that that's kind of a very important part. In addition to, oh my God, aftercare. Why is that not talked about more? So many people are exploring these intense situations without even realizing that aftercare is a thing or like what that word means, and it's not just physical aftercare. In general, a lot of it is the mental, the psychological aftercare. That's so important. And frequently, I think one of my biggest contentions with the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon is that it doesn't put a focus on aftercare and the value of that. It's just completely absent.
Yeah, and then people always associate, because of 50 Shades of Grey, I think, any version of aftercare came into their head, they might always associate it with sex as well, which is like, so that's fine. I love that. I had a play partner once who like after BDSM would want to do sex. And I'm like, oh my God, like I need cuddles and I need like a water and I need a blanket. So we had to negotiate aftercare. Like, oh, maybe their husband could come in and give them sex while I went and got cuddled by like my partner, or maybe like it was, at the time I was in an open relationship. So it was easier to kind of like move people in directions and get people involved and call people and have a backup. Like I loved having play partners that would say like, I I can give you this kind of aftercare. Can we get someone else to do it? Yes. Let's rope our friends in. Let's get everybody
The
involved.
best part of a community.
Yes, and that's what I loved about being involved in this is there was a community. Now, okay, safe, sane, consensual, and risk-aware kink. Every community, every bubble is gonna describe this differently, this relationship, because I think they kind of go together personally. Because again, if you're risk aware, then you're being safe and you're being healthy and hopefully you're being sane. So it's kind of like it's hard to but some people do like to associate like risk aware kink with the heavier play with like we had a dungeon party that was specifically for everything that was hardcore. But even breath play, guys, there's not really technically a safe way to do it. Dr. Lindsay Doe on YouTube talks about alternative lifestyles and kink through psychology, and she often says like breath play is great, but it's about harm reduction. It's not really about taking away the possibility of harm. There's safer ways to do harmful things. Just like smoking a cigarette has a filter on it. It's like we're doing our best to harm reduce, but we're still smoking. And so I think there's nothing wrong with that. You have a limited time on earth. You should spend it how you want. But everything from physical to mental has a healthy and unhealthy side. And I was thinking about this in relation to today's topic. Do you think that being involved in kink, if people don't know if you're doing it healthy or unhealthy, should change how people perceive you? And should you be prejudged because you're in BDSM or kink? Do you ever prejudge people for the kinds of kinks they have?
Should we know? Do we? Honestly, yes, a
Yeah.
little bit.
Always judge a little bit, but there's part of me also that always wants to have an open mind, even if I'm like, yeah.
I think
I
if I
try to
find
make generalizations, right? Like if somebody is generally submissive or generally dominant, I can kind of maybe guess a few things about why they're into that, possibly.
Yeah.
Arena?
I was gonna say, I think if somebody just says to me generally that they're into BDSM or like, are swingers kinky?
Oh.
Okay, that's a different relationship dynamic.
The
Maybe
Is
not.
that vanilla kinky? Wait, are swingers vanilla kinky? Because that's pretty kinky.
Yes.
But yeah,
But
but
not-
they could
yeah.
just be like engaging
How do-
in actual vanilla behaviors, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. So like if somebody just says like, oh,
Partner swap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
so yeah, if somebody just says BDSM general, I don't prejudge. But then if they're more specific about their kink, there are some that I do judge. And it's fully my bias. It's just like what I've seen in those communities. There are some where I'll be like, okay, like maybe you stay in outer circle friend and not inner outer circle
Is
friend.
that, do you want to share which ones? You don't have to.
Sure. Yeah, no. So I feel like the people can probably guess because I have like very again a wary relationship with particularly the DOMs of these kinks, stuff like anything that has to do with age regression or anything that has to do with dressing up or looking like a child.
Sure.
That to me is something that I definitely prefer to stay away from.
Yeah.
And it is like if somebody informs me that they are into that, then that informs me of what place they will have in my life or how close they can get, which is not as close.
It's interesting. I think one of the only concerns I have in relation to age regression play is if people are like 19, then I'm like, well, that was like 6 months ago. So like, let's talk about like age regression, right? Are you medically age regressing, which needs therapy, or are you role playing and having an age regression in like a spiritual way, which I think happens in the dungeon? I specify these into 3 categories for a reason, because I do think there's medical age regression, which needs like the therapy, like you were harmed and you need to go to somebody for that. But then I think people role play, and then I think people have like what I call like a spiritual experience with it, where this is so hard to say out loud. It's like, I know I'm role playing in the dungeon, but I also feel like it's so real in the moment and in the scene. I'm like, is this role play? But then I'm like, yes, it's role play. But I'm like, is it role play? So sometimes with even like dom and sub relationships, it feels so intimate. You're getting collared. It's like giving an engagement ring. It feels really important. There's something so intimate about it. And so sometimes I even have a hard time deciding like, when is it role play and when is it just a feeling that's so intimate that it is real, whatever real means to. I have a slave and I'm a master. It's like, what does that mean when you know what I mean? But there's something so intimate about it. So I will say with age regression, I get a little just concerned if people are confusing the medical age regression with the kink age regression. And I definitely want to separate those personally. But otherwise, like, I dated a girl who was a little, that was a lot of fun. I identified as a little in my 20s. That was a lot of fun. But now I'm just so much more in my like top E space that I've moved away from most of my bottom identifiers. Though I'm sure there's somewhere in there in the back of my head, you know?
I think I would only engage in the age play with like someone who is very close with, like on an intimate level. As a sex worker, in-person sex worker, I don't like doing that with clients that I don't know, because I don't know their why behind it. I don't know, yeah, if they're healthy or yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If they, in those situations, if they want to schedule like some sort of time where we can talk and discuss like where they're coming from, what their goals are, and that sort of stuff, and it's feeling respectful and like we're going about it in a good way, then maybe. But initially, that can be a red flag, if you will.
Okay, I'm curious. Do you think that going back to prejudging people, would you prejudge like the president or your kid's teacher? Or do you think as a society we should prejudge people who are into kinks or even have fetishes if they have jobs of importance, if they have jobs that like impact the community?
My prejudgment when I generally hear that people are kinky is a lot of times it makes me want to like them more, and it makes me get to know them more. I feel like I feel like, oh, I can like relate to this person. I can be more authentically myself.
Yeah.
Because I think it does come back to a lot of the fact my experience with the community is generally that they are more respectful. Generally, they're going to be more accepting of my boundaries. We're going to be able to have this consent relationship, whether we're looking at anything sexual, non-sexual, whatever. I'm going to probably assume that they have a slightly better level of communication than somebody who doesn't have that exposure. And so if I were to find out that a teacher or a political figure had that, I think it would make me honestly respect them a little bit more and feel like I could relate to them more.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say same, except for one kind of person that I do prejudge really hard. And it's only online community spaces, but I don't understand why the foot fetish community is so toxic. Like, I don't understand why they're so consumed. I don't understand why they DM everybody on FetLife. I don't understand why they can't understand consent boundaries. Like, they're so far away. The foot fetish community is so far away from consent. Like, I don't understand them at all. And I don't know what is up with that group of people, mostly males. Like, I don't know what is going on with that community.
Well, I think that's where the distinction between the kink versus fetish comes in, right? Because just because you have a foot fetish does not mean that you're engaging in the BDSM community, that you're engaging in the safe, same, consensual. And if we have a culture where, you know, people are going to be weird about your cleavage and people are going to be entitled and like send you dick pics or whatever,
Yeah.
they're going to be looking at those grippers. So there's like definitely a lot of women now that like only wear socks online, like never show like their feet because they're gonna end up on wiki feet. Yeah, no free feet.
Yeah. I posted a picture and it showed my feet and people were like, for free? And I was like, oh my God.
Can I share something really interesting? Maybe it's not interesting to you guys. Maybe you already know it. But when I was looking into some research for this panel, I learned that the hypothesis currently amongst evolutionary biologists is that we see so many foot fetishes or people with interest in feet because of the way that our brain is set up, the way we receive the way that we process sensations for our genitals is like physically almost right up against the area where we process sensation for our feet. And so they can kind of like cross wires, so to say. I mean, that's like such an uneloquent and not like medical description of what's
Perfectly
happening.
said though, but true.
I think that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, even in my lived experience, I wouldn't even say that my whole life I was like, oh, like people are like feet are ugly, feet are ugly. I was like, well, I mean, everything in the human body is beautiful. And so I did in my 20s do a lot of like feet focus scenes because I was like, I'm gonna defy this like cultural ick around feet. And I was like, I'm gonna face this. And now I'm like, oh, feet are great, but I don't really think of feet as different from hands. I'm just like, oh, one more thing to put places, one more thing to like, do stuff with.
Yeah.
One more set of like phalanges.
Yeah.
For me, I think feet are they could take it or leave it. It's whatever. I mean, obviously we have another set of phalanges and something, 2 more things you can do stuff with, which is great. I like using all parts of the body, but for me, the foot element that feels sexy is when it ties into fashion. So that's probably kind of a kink for me. Like I love sexy shoes. I love high heels. Love stockings and like dressing the feet in a sexy way. I think is really my preferred niche of that market.
Mm-hmm. I do. I like hands and feet. I think they're just beautiful. I'm not like sexually attracted to them, but I think they're very beautiful in general.
I think it can be markers of like health in a way. Like I know like a lot of women actually, it's found like really love hands. There's actually a Coves video on it where what types of hands do women tend to prefer, and it's like the long fingers, kind of bony. And I think same with feet. Like I don't love the stubby little chubby toes as much. I like to see the veins and the tendons, of all the appendages.
Wait, say that again, Harmony.
Oh, I said like the kind that Michelangelo painted on the Sistine Chapel. Like the long, again, veiny, like toes that look like they could be fingers. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like it brings it all together. Like when I get a manicure, like I do my nails, or even recently I've been trying to like take care of my fingernails better, not bite them and stuff. And I've been clipping them instead of biting them. And I've been trying really hard. Even when they break, I broke one the other day, so I had to like shave them all back down. But I'm realizing it makes me feel like I'm put together, like head to toe, literally. And so I will say there's something about like I love when my feet look cute. I'm not gonna play.
Yeah, me too. It's like part of the uniform or something that like clicks your brain into like yeah.
When I worked in corporate, I did a lot of HR interviewing, things of that nature. And one of the things that I remember I was guilty of, and also is found to be true for most people who are doing interviews, is looking at the condition of somebody's hands and feet or their shoes. If somebody's putting themselves together for an interview, obviously barring any like socioeconomic circumstantial issues where they don't have maybe the ability to be wearing a nice pair of shoes, but like, are they clean? Are their laces nicely tied? Have they washed their hands? Have they clipped their fingernails? Things like that. It kind of shows good health, good hygiene practices, kind of attention to detail, things that trigger positive associations with somebody that you might want to interact with.
I wonder if that's why I like the dungeon in general, because I always say like the philosophy I had in the dungeon was like Sunday best. So come to the dungeon looking cute is like an excuse to dress up. Everybody is dressed to the nines. And people were like, there was a little bit of a competition with like who looked the cutest. Like, let's be real, like who had the best leather, who like came dressed to the nines, because it's expensive. Kink and BDSM is the most expensive hobby I've ever had in my life. It's like so expensive. So there is a judgment there, but it's also about hygiene. And that's why every dungeon I've ever been a part of had showers for cleaning and showers for kink, 2 different spaces, because they wanted people to stay clean. They wanted hygiene. They wanted like protection to be there. They wanted thoughtful. They had such thoughtfulness about safety. It was such, I love those environments. Which brings me to the question I guess I want to ask you guys. Is your kink spiritual, lifestyle, hobby, identity?
Probably more like hobby for me.
More hobby?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Identity, spiritual, and lifestyle, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
It's spiritual for me, definitely. I would love to like learn more about and like actually explore deeper, maybe in a more like in a actual dungeon or something. But for right now, it's very spiritual for me, personal, between me and myself, and the people that I choose to interact with.
Yeah. Okay, this is why I love, okay, again, depending on what bubble is observing you and you're having this relationship with it, they could just assume so much about it. Like, oh, it's always sexual, or oh, it's always about an orgasm, or oh, it's always about. And I think that that's why I love this community or this hobby or this lifestyle in general, is that it could be whatever you want it to be. So it can
Mhm.
be so intimately curated to you, the consciousness. And for some people, I mean, I know BDSM families where like your kids are second generation, third generation kink. I know people that are coming out to their families about it. I know people that like create and curate events around it. I know people that are openly kink at 24/7. I know people that are, everyone has a different relationship with it. I think I'm more like I don't advertise it in public except on the internet, which is I guess public, but you know what I mean. I'm not walking down Croatian streets being like BDSM. You know, I'm very like,
Yeah, you're not carrying your bullwhip
yeah,
around or
it's like,
anything.
you know what I mean. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. But I wondered, have any of you guys had to like come out to your family or like tell your family? Because I know my mom. Okay, I did when I was young, when I was like 19, 20. I don't know. Before I was even in the community, I had a blog and my mom and dad would read it. And I wrote about BDSM communities as a concept, not the community, but I wrote about BDSM as a concept through fiction.
Okay.
That's okay. So, cause I didn't even know
Okay,
yet.
yeah.
And my dad was like, why are you interested? Why are you even researching this stuff? And I was like, I don't know. I think it's interesting, I guess. And so like, I guess I was already coming out. And now, of course, my parents know I'm in the lifestyle and everything. We don't talk about it, but they know. And we have like PG conversations around it, you know, kind of like PG. But have any of you guys had to have like a conversation with your parents or siblings or friends?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that actually, because today I was talking to my mom about this live stream and she wanted to know what it was about. And I told her she probably didn't want to know. And she said, okay, and changed the subject. But my family knows that I'm involved in sex work and they don't want to know any details
Sure.
because they're a very conservative Catholic family. And I respect that. And I don't want them to know either. So
Yeah.
they aware enough so that I don't have to be living a lie when I'm around them. But yeah, and that's plenty for me.
I am probably an example of the almost like a BDSM or kink family, in that I am born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area by very liberal parents with a lot of influence from their close friends who took on pseudo parental roles in certain ways. I was surrounded from my earliest memories of people who were in the BDSM community. My mom had her closest friend, my godfather, was a gay man who has been involved with San Francisco Pride and leather and kink since I was little. I mean, like I was like waiting in the car outside Mr. S's leather shop as like a 5-year-old kid.
Let's go.
Like, amazing. So I don't think anybody is surprised because sexuality wasn't ever taboo to me growing up. Now, granted, there was things that were appropriate for adults and things that were appropriate for children.
Yeah.
And as I aged, I could be exposed to more things. I could be in the grown-up rooms at family functions and things like that, where, you know, you would have the ability to maybe have conversations with family members that would be really awkward and uncomfortable for some people. Now, with that being said, like my stepfather and I don't necessarily talk about the same things that my mother and I do because I don't think that he wants to know so much about it. But my mom, fascinated by what I do. And even though she's never been a professional sex worker herself, she's been surrounded by that, and that's been her people growing up. So I feel really fortunate in that capacity that like it's a part of, it's something you can explore as an adult if you want to. And I love that, and I hope that more people get that experience.
For me, it's very don't ask, don't tell, maybe similar to Harmony. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. Same with my sexuality. I am bisexual, and my mom knows, but doesn't know, if that makes sense. It's very much just like something that we don't really discuss.
Okay, I'm curious then. Do you well, first of all, everyone on this panel is queer, yes?
Mhm.
Okay. And then because we all have like families or we were once children who were interested in things and grew up to be adults, do you think there's any disadvantage for exposing children to just the reality that this could be a thing that they could do when they got older?
Looking at myself, I know that in online spaces, especially more conservative ones, my family it has been suggested that my upbringing is to blame for me being this promiscuous person.
Mm,
um, I mean, I guess if that's your viewpoint in your bubble and that's a bad thing, okay. In my opinion, that's a good thing. So, um, I guess it's just a different perspective.
yeah. Yeah. Because I know the stigmas here in our communities. I mean, people are always using the G word and throwing it around, and calling everyone a groomer. And I'm just sitting here like, okay, everybody relax. Like, everybody relax. But I will say there is like always a healthy and unhealthy way to do everything from religion to veganism to kink to I just feel like lifestyle is lifestyle and some of your kids aren't going to want it. Like I dated a person whose like parents were kink and so he was second generation but like his sister absolutely wanted nothing to do with it. Just like wanted nothing to do with it. Vanilla through and through. And it was like your kids are their own individuals and I feel like they're going to make their own choices in the end. Like my parents were vanilla as far as I know. And here I am. So, everyone's different. And none of my other siblings, funny enough, not I have 9 siblings and not one of them BDSM or kink.
I can say the same. I have 3 sisters, and I am the only one who has taken this interest in this fascination. We all grew up in the same household,
Yep.
and they lead very vanilla lives, and they're satisfied and happy and content, and I'm happy for them, and they're just as accepting of my unconventional lifestyle as I am of their traditional lives.
So funny how that happens.
Yeah. So
It's also
I don't
funny.
think that just being exposed to it automatically creates an adult who will pursue it.
Mm.
I was gonna say people smoke around their kids, and then sometimes they raise smokers, and sometimes they don't raise smokers.
Yeah.
So I think giving your child age-appropriate information, the more information you could give your child, I think the better, personally.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I remember I was like 7-ish years old, or maybe even younger, and there's this Russian song called Putana. And if you speak Italian, you know what that means. It means, prostitute.
Mm.
And I was listening to the song and was like, Mom, what's that mean? And my mom was like, oh, that means prostitute. And I was 7. And that didn't make me become a sex worker or anything, just because I knew that that was a possibility in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely, like, I think giving your child information and then they can process it and do with it what they want. Obviously, you also want to create boundaries of these are for adults, and then this is appropriate for children.
Yeah. Well, in this online space, I'll tell you one of the problems I had is like my audience is now old. It's like 20 to 50-year-olds and it ages with me. And primarily the biggest chunk is 30 to 40-year-olds. Okay. According to my YouTube analytics. When I was doing BDSM content, it was young people. And I was like mortified in some ways because I was like, I know you're curious and I want to be the safe space for you to gain knowledge and to wait and to think about your agency and your consent. And another part of me was like, well, if kids are having these questions, and I did certainly as a teenager, where do they go? And hopefully they do find like good channels that will tell them to slow down and give themselves a moment and not just move in with the first quote unquote dominant who's 45 and living in his basement. And let's wait a minute and think about how to do this in a healthy way. I do think more information is probably better than less information. And I think the right information is kind of key here, making sure people get the right information in order to stay safe. Even when it comes to poly or open relationships, like this illusion or maybe delusion, I don't know, people have this misrepresentation of the communities that like, oh, you're in an open relationship, there's no such thing as cheating. I hear that all the time and I'm like, stop. Like cheating is just like a breaking of a consent, like it's a consent violation. You broke something, it can't like cheat. Of course cheating can exist. Like I don't understand this, but I think it's this narrative of I want to join a lifestyle that lets me do whatever I want with no boundaries, whether it's kink or poly or open. And I'm sitting here like, no, the greatest part of being able to choose whatever lifestyle you want is being able to say no to other things. It's being able to
Mm-hmm.
say yes to some things and no to other things. Not to say, oh, well, now I don't have any like accountability. Now I can do whatever I want. Now I'm free to just cause havoc. It's like, no. So I think that's a great lesson to send to children when they're listening to us, is saying like consent matters. Be thoughtful about people's boundaries. And I know for myself, consent culture in BDSM circles has made me a much better auntie. And I've been able to tell my nieces and nephews, Auntie Brittany loves you. She wants to give you attention, but she needs like 10 minutes of her own time right now. This is a consent tool that I learned from BDSM to teach the children not to grow up to be little like people that assume people's time and spoons, but also like there's an appropriate time for attention. And you can't just get it because you want it at every moment, right? So again, for me,
Absolutely.
it's about the right information getting out there.
Yeah, and also we can use those same tools to teach children about like practicing their own consent. For example, my older sister, very, very traditional lifestyle. However, because she grew up in the same like liberal, accepting, somewhat kinky household that I did, she's able to use a lot of those consent tools with her children. They can choose, do they want to give someone a hug when they're at a family function? And how do they say, no, thank you, I don't want to give you a hug right now? Or, how do they express what's okay for them within their body, even in a completely non-kinky or sexual way? And that's a really good tool to have.
It is. Okay, can I say something on that? Because I know when I first heard about that idea of like not hugging somebody at a gathering, I was raised so differently, right? You hugged people,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there were sometimes creepers at the gatherings, and my mom would be like, "You don't have to hug that person, though." And so my mom even taught me in a weird way, like hug your aunties and uncles, but like it's okay that some people you don't hug. But in particular, when you have a safe relative and you don't want to hug them, what's that like? So that happened with me and my oldest nephew. He's very sensory overloady, and so he will be like, Auntie Brittany, I can't handle being hugged right now. And I was like, okay. And like, I just want to hug him. And he's like, oh, that was a lot. Like, he's the way he talks is so cute. But I told my brother, I was like, this is not offensive to me. I like that he tells me his boundaries. I want him to say, Auntie Brittany, like, I can't do this right now. So I can go, oh, no problem. I love you all the same. He goes, okay, it's about accepting that these kids are gaining tools that I just didn't always have access to or able to say, like, in a safe space, no, thank you. Not just in a, you know what I mean? Like, I want it to be a positive association, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think it's really healthy and beautiful to provide an environment for children to grow in that encourages them to know themselves in every way. And yeah, I think that there are developmentally appropriate ways to talk to children about their bodies, about their urges, about sex, that are not harmful. And like, I do think the hug or the high five or the high thing, I do that with my, in a way that is introducing the culture to them. That's an example of that,
Yeah.
And so when people hear that, I think alarm bells go off, but it doesn't look like it looks for adults when you're, teaching children the core concepts.
Yeah.
You know,
What do you
sense
think
and
about that? For me, and I don't want to say everyone's doing this, but for me, I will say I learned consent from kink, and I learned how to teach that to vanillas by thinking about consent through kink. Like, how would a vanilla learn this? How do I respect their boundaries? How do I teach the kids? How do I teach my brother? How do I teach people? Because even as an older sister who wrestles with her brothers, sometimes I'll be like, yellow, red, I don't want to wrestle anymore. Like, you're overwhelming me. I feel like this is going to trigger my PTSD. And sometimes, like, I'll even have my brothers be like, what the hell? Like, what do you mean it's going to trigger your PTSD? Like, bro, we're just wrestling. And I was like, and then I'll have to explain to them, like, consent in a language they understand. For me, I just find it funny that kink culture taught me consent and vanilla culture failed me and failed everyone around me about it.
Well, in a way, kink culture is a response to vanilla culture, right? It is kind of like a counterculture, right? It's people who don't feel fulfilled in some aspect about themselves and are looking for something. Or maybe they do feel fulfilled because they're able to like be in that community.
That's a great freaking point. Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I know a lot of people who feel like they've been out of control in other aspects of their life. And BDSM is a really great way for them to have control and have structure. Brittany alluded to this earlier for her, and I know it's helpful for me as well. And it just it can really provide a lot of positive elements for someone, above and beyond any sexual gratification, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, okay, ladies, I want to throw it to you guys to discuss anything that's been on your noggin in relation to this, since this is a group activity. So throw me your thoughts my way. And then I was going to, if it's okay with you, I want to ask my audience too if they have any questions for us. Okay, so audience, do you have questions? Type them in the chat. And then ladies, any thoughts that you want to expand upon since we're all here together?
So I was thinking about what you were talking about, Brittany, how people can view certain lifestyles as an opportunity to be boundless, or rather boundaryless.
Yes.
And I think about how it relates to poetry, especially when you're starting out with any kind of art or creativity. A lot of people want to like go in subverting the rules right away. But I think creating a boundary can like make you more creative than before. Like particularly writing poems, if you have to write like a villanelle versus if you're writing freeform, it's like a whole different game. And also, once you know the rules, once you know the boundaries, you can start to play with, okay, what can I switch up and change around? And I think that's definitely like something to keep in mind, is that boundaries, like, and also when we're talking about ages, right? Like I think kids need much more bigger boundaries, and as they grow, they get to be more, they get to have more agency in regards to those boundaries, right? Because in childhood, you as a parent place some boundaries upon the kid for their protection, and hopefully you are doing that in a healthy way. And then as they grow, they get to, maybe they're a teenager, they get to say, okay, mom, like, I want such and such time in my room, etc. So boundaries are good. Like explore, creatively within them, and then learn how you can break them.
Absolutely. And like I always say, like boundaries are for yourself. So one of the things that I always feel BDSM has helped me with is to ask myself, like, well, why am I interested in this thing? Right? Forced me to be introspective. Why do I even like it this way? And actually, I think this comes from my BDSM mentor. I was mentored by an older woman in her 50s who was in the leather community, and she was a dominant. And she made me do questionnaires. She made me read a bunch of books. She made me really ask myself, like, what am I doing here? What do I imagine I would want from this space? Somebody in the comments said, why BDSM people always seem like natural teachers. And I think a part of that is that we're really excited about this tool that we found only in this niche community. And not that other communities don't have similar tools, but there's something really special, I think, about this space that I just don't think you're going to understand unless you connect to it or have experienced it in a particular way. I just can't. I just get so excited when a newbie comes to me and they're like, what do I do? Because I remember coming to my mentor and saying, like, I'm sorry, what's a what? Who's a who? And like, what does this mean? And I didn't know anything, like, except what I read in fiction. And as we know, fiction isn't always the greatest representation. And so for me, I just learned so much by being so excited about this new tool that could give me more access to knowing myself and being more safe in life.
I think that's a common experience for a lot of people in the community, because I wholeheartedly agree with myself. I feel so grateful for the mentors and the teachers and the guidance that I had, that like it's such an honor to be able to take on that role for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're excited, I think, generalizing here, to see people be safe. Now, again, I think the mistake I've made in the past speaking so highly of my communities is that people think, like, again, predators don't exist in our communities. But
Right.
predators exist everywhere. So just remember, like, not everybody is actually there to help you. But most people, I would say, generally speaking, are, especially if you go to an organized event like Kink Fest in Portland, or if you go to Folsom, or if you go to an event that's put on by mentors or elders in the community, you're going to have a much safer experience than if you just meet some rando on FetLife, which those events aren't vetted. It's not like somebody's going to FetLife and vetting every event that happens. So just, if you start delving into this community, don't mistake people for organizations or communities, right?
I think it's really important to do your research, like we've been talking about before, but see, who's putting this event on, who's behind this event. Is it
Yeah.
something that feels professional and well organized, or is it giving me super sketch vibes where it's just some random person? We don't have Craigslist casual encounters anymore, but you got to be a little bit wary of certain things. And
Absolutely.
the more professional community organization that it seems, that's probably a good clue that it'll be a mostly safe event.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, ladies, before I go to a question?
I was gonna say, oh my gosh, in my brain. Oh yes. So I think like people have like a different way of like jumping into the BDSM world. There are people like who go into it because it's risky. I kind of got into it, and the way I got into it, I've always been like not goody two shoes, but a goody two shoes. I like a good set of rules. I like a rule book. I used to love like those pages on Tumblr, like this is not a corset, or like this way of piercing isn't safe. Like this is like, and they would show like, hey, don't self pierce at home. If you're getting tattoos, piercings, you want it to be in a sterile shop. And same with BDSM. So I would watch like the documentary Modify, which is a really great documentary on like body modification, and which has some crossover with kink as well. So I will say that like the rules are there for a reason. There are people who have gone into it, in a more risky way and have come out with wisdom, which is what they're sharing with us. So I've been fortunate enough to where I was very, very like aware of the rules when I started exploring. That was like the first places that I would go is like
Yeah.
the professionals, the people who've already documented these things.
Yeah, and if you're gonna do play at home, if you can't get to a dungeon, if there's no dungeon in your country or area or city, the good news is that now we're even doing kink events via the internet. So people can do classes online now. You can see instructors online now. Like our communities are becoming less and less boomer. So we're figuring out how to like come to the internet and offer you guys a space there. So I will say there are people, I mean, there's like Evie Lupine on YouTube, and there's other people like What's the Safe Word? So there are even YouTubers in the space who are focused on BDSM, doing it safe, sane, consensual, risk-aware kink, and they will teach you how to do it at home alone if you don't have a community to go to. Because remember, the community is now online. So there's some perks in that regard.
Major benefit that is available now that wasn't certainly,
Yeah.
18 years ago when I first started exploring.
Right? It's amazing. I love it. Okay, so Magic Dragon wants to know, do you think, or do you all think every person has a kink deep down?
Yes, not everybody has a fetish at all, but certainly
Mhm.
if we go back to our original definitions at the beginning of the conversation, I think everybody has some kink,
Yeah.
at least somewhere.
Yeah, because I think even I could be wrong for the asexual community. They should speak up if I'm misrepresenting them.
Mm.
But I feel like even they experience turn-ons, but it doesn't mean that sex needs to be the end goal of a turn-on, right? So I think if I'm not mistaken, they do have like physical reactions. They still have like a physiological reaction to like orgasming and stuff, but it's more like a motivation or a focus. So I wonder if asexuals even identify with having kinks. I assume so, right? And especially non-sexual kinks.
Yeah.
I have heard some asexual content creators talk briefly on this, how they can experience a kink certainly, and they'll have maybe like that mental stimulation, but then there's not the motivation for it to continue
Yeah.
through like genitals, and
Yeah.
orgasm is certainly not like an end goal in any capacity.
Well, even as I'm talking, Evie Lupine is an asexual BDSM content creator who talks about kink. So, like, I don't know what I'm talking about
There
here,
we
well,
go.
ma'am. So obviously there's that, I just associated kink in this conversation with like things that turn you on. And then I was like, wait, does she have that experience? But I don't know. So anyways, go to her channel and figure it out.
I was gonna say, how are we defining kink? Because
Ah,
I feel like you can get a very similar feeling, for example, from going to a masseuse. Is that kinky? I would say no. And then there's like, this whole idea that especially for women, foreplay starts outside of the bedroom. Like, have you cleaned the dishes? Have you put away the laundry? And that can be is that a kink? Or is it just kind of like a normal, or is just having like pleasant feelings towards certain events kind of like a regular, maybe even vanilla experience? So I don't know if I agree that everybody has a kink. but I think it's just because I'm not sure how we're defining it. Because I
That's a
do
good
think
point.
that everybody has turn-ons that are outside of being touched, like with, or their genitals being touched, right? But what makes it kinky versus not?
Yeah, I guess on a planet of 8 billion
Okay.
people, there's going to be an anomaly or people who are in this category of people who maybe don't have a relationship with that word. I would have to assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the definition does change the answer for sure.
Yeah. What about this question from Ari? How do you assume the persona you use during play? Which I take to mean like how do you assume the role? Like how do you know what I mean? So okay, this is where my relationship with like role play and spirituality come in because again, sometimes when I'm just like standing in the kitchen, all of a sudden I'll like look at my partner and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do something right now. And like it's gonna be like, I'm gonna slam him up against the wall and we're going for it, whatever it is. That feels so like inherent. That feels really natural. That does not feel like I thought about role playing. That feels like I'm gonna do this right now. Like I'm gonna be primal right now. And like that's what I'm engaging with, something in me. So like assuming the role maybe even happens outside of play, in play, it's part of it is a part of me and then a part of it only exists in a scene. What do you guys think?
Yeah. It's kind of like improv for me.
Mm.
Like you get into this kind of like headspace and you kind of see, it sounds so woo woo. I'm sorry. You just see where the vibes take you, where the energy takes you. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like,
ma'am.
and yeah, it's very imaginal. It's very like creating worlds and then making them real as you realize them. Yeah.
Yeah. Costuming does it a lot for me as well. Like if I
Mhm.
know in advance that I'm going to be participating in a scene, whether it's personal or professional, and I have the ability to put myself together in a certain way, that helps me to assume that personality. I will maybe wear a specific fragrance. I'll listen to certain music beforehand,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. In my personal life, I do find myself being more spontaneous and needing less costuming or less preparation, but in a professional way, in order for me to feel my best and feel like I am providing the best service, it's important for me to have this preparation time where I can kind of get myself into the mindset and the mood.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I have a ritual pretty much beforehand,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? About putting on, the various parts of my uniform, as it were, like my outfit. It's all about like, and as I'm doing that, I'm getting into the headspace just by going through those motions, like something about
Mhm.
doing it. That's the same reason that BDSM is so uh cathartic, maybe, because you're going
Mhm.
through emotions. It's not just, you're not stuck in your head, you're like embodying and enacting something.
Yeah.
Yeah. The persona
Absolutely.
part of me, but it takes a special something to get in that headspace.
Mhm. Yeah, I can get that. Any other thoughts on that before we go to the next question?
For me, it's a little bit, I mean, maybe more similar to what Madame Genevieve said, in that I think that if I'm going into a scene, it's basically me. But if I am putting on a persona, it's going to be more for a performative sense. And then there's like a wall between me, like, for example, maybe being able to go into subspace. Like, if I'm being too performative, then that's not really going to happen that same way.
Yeah.
Relatable. Yeah,
my
that's
my
relatable.
dom persona feels a little bit more. I amp up that a little bit more, whereas my subspace feels more raw, a little bit like less performative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
definitely, just getting in specific headspaces.
Yeah. This question I'm excited about. Don't overshare if you don't want to, of course, ladies. Jessica wants to know, may we ask what are some of everyone's favorites or least favorite kinks or fetishes? Or their own if they want to share, no worries. So like you can talk about in general or you can relate it to yourself. What are we all comfortable with?
I love sensory stuff. I like just various like touches, soft touches, in combination with like hard like smacks and like,
Mm,
or like even the feeling of like chainmail being dragged like on my nipples or my genitals, or so that hard and coldness,
yeah.
or I like love all the sensory stuff of every kind. And I also love like power exchange and energy exchange on that level, like the more psychological.
Yeah.
And then the two, it's like chef's kiss for me.
Agree.
Yeah.
I really love bondage and like feeling of being restrained for my personal enjoyment. And there's probably a various different reasons why that's appealing to me that I won't get into here, but just the idea of like not having that control is something that is a very sexy concept for me. I also really enjoy impact play and sensation play. I think it's fun to experiment with restricting certain senses to highlight other ones. So, I mean, at a most basic level, a blindfold, but you can take that up in a million different directions. And I think that's a really fun way to play too.
Yes.
For me, it's, oh my gosh, so many things. I do like sensory stuff, so knife play, which goes with the cold, so temperature play. I do like also bondage and restriction. I'm curious about vacuum, like the vacuum bag
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
That looks really fun. Like
Yes.
it just looks like a fun sensory experience. Like that's not necessarily sexual for me. I just like being in small spaces. I'm very like the opposite of claustrophobic. And I like not breath play, but blood restriction play.
Mm.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
like not like pressing on the windpipe, but just like maybe restricting some
Mhm.
blood flow. And I've never tried rigging, so that's another like one that I'm curious about. Suspension, stuff like that. And I do like blood play. And then on my more sadist side, I do like tickling.
Yeah.
Just tying someone up and just tickling.
There's
think
so much
I
I
have
like.
a love-hate relationship with tickling because it's like it's the ultimate for me. Like that's giving up so much control. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And I'm just like, I can feel tingles over my body just imagining being in that situation. And it just wow, tickling is intense.
Yeah.
You know what I like is wrestling. I don't know if that's considered
Yes.
BDSM.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I used to go to a wrestling BDSM event every Monday.
Yes, nice. I love it. I love just getting
Do
really
you guys
physical and entwined.
Yeah.
do you guys know who Daisy Ducati is? She is a adult performer out of San Francisco, and she has some amazing wrestling content. So
Ooh.
shout out Daisy.
We'll Google.
Really cool.
Well, Google. No, actually, okay. Like literally, there was a wrestling event I used to go to every Monday, and it was really cool. And they even had a person come in and would teach us like self defense to go along with the wrestling stuff. That's where I took my self defensive
Awesome.
classes. Honestly, the BDSM dungeon has given me access to so many mental health related like positive things because there were therapists in the dungeon and doctors in the dungeon, and they would mentor the classes and they would use their expertise to come give us. Even the lawyers in our community would hold events about what to do if the cops came to the door because someone heard you screaming, and how to explain to the cops that it's consensual. Like I've been really blessed with the communities that I've been in. But relating to like tickling and like almost like I've been really into like fear stuff where I've noticed myself becoming like this like toppy villain every time I see like a little bit of fear. I'm like, I feel like I don't know what comes over me, but I laugh more than I've ever laughed in my life. It feels like really fun and safe. And like, I love challenging myself too with like, what fears can I face, or what fears can my partner face, or like what fears can we overcome? And I have enough of them. There's actually this place, I don't know if it's still it's still there, but in San Diego there was this house, and you have to like sign a waiver, and they tell them your fears, and the idea is to go from one end of the house to the next, and it's like a house of horrors. But then they're the kind of people that like use bugs and like use icky things, and it's not even BDSM related, it's like horror related. But I think of that kind of stuff, like could I face myself in that way? Could I face a fear in that way? Could I like how could I handle it? And I think I just handle it by laughing usually. But even I have my limits, and that's what I'm into right now. It's like the idea of like giggling my way through fears.
Is that the McKinley Manor?
Maybe.
I think they got kicked out because they were like not listening, like they weren't respecting safe words. Which
Probably
I think
not.
is on track.
I believe that.
Which like yeah.
Yeah, it probably
That's
was
not part of
them,
BDSM.
but not part of BDSM. Not a part of BDSM. But yeah, probably because I dated a girl who wanted to do it with me, and I was like, I just feel like if they're not BDSM related, I don't know. And then of course, like I heard bugs, and I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to like involve myself with that. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on that before I read another question? Okay, this question's hard to answer because it would force me to remember things, but any BDSM cultural things that are worth recommending, books, movies, anime, music, anything that kind of represents it in a good way other than the classics. I mean, we all have classics under our belt. We've all seen like Secretary and stuff, though caveat, how it's represented, isn't always perfect. So anything recently that's been in media? Oh, there was one. Wait, there's this K-drama one that I saw recently. It's really good actually about BDSM. I will figure it out and put it on a pinned comment after this with everyone's social so you guys can find all these wonderful ladies online. So I will I don't know what it's called. Levin, I know my audience knows what it is, but that one was really, really good. I cried. It was really good.
Wow. Okay, I want to know what that is.
I thought it was really good. It was just like really well, like the intimacy of the story and like the kink, and it was just like, yeah, I cried. But anything
I
else?
can't think of any off the top of my head. I am terrible, honestly, at remembering like names of different books and movies and things like that. It's always like somewhat in my mind, but not fully there. If I
Yeah.
do think of any, I will comment on the post,
Perfect.
send it to you, and we can update as
Okay, great.
as it goes on.
Yeah, great. What about like how did you know relating it to the subject matter of today, like in healthy or unhealthy, like how do you know you're finding a healthy environment with kink? How do you know you're finding healthy people? Like that's what is so scary about this world is like usually when you're doing kink, yes, you could do it with yourself, but what happens when you want to meet other people and do it with them? How do you know that they're being healthy with their kink?
Ask a
I
lot of
think-
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, vetting, asking to speak to previous play partners and their experiences with them. And in terms of like a community, see like for example, if you hear like a lot of like rumors around a community, but they're very like, secretive about it, I think that's probably a red flag. But if they're like, yes, like we had this person, we have blacklisted them, this is what happened, that's probably more of a green flag that your concerns are going to be addressed. I also had some media, or rather tip for media, I think like going straight to the source. So I do like the documentary Modify. Again, it's not directly related to kink, but I think it is adjacent.
Mhm.
And then going to BDSM content creators, I do like Dr. Lindsay Doe, right? I like her. Lacey Green used to make really good content around consent as well. I don't know what she's doing now, but
Yeah.
back in the day, she had a really, really good channel. Evie Lupine would probably be a good resource as well. So just
Yeah.
going straight to the source, because fiction or media tends to be a lot about the fantasy of it, which doesn't always involve consent in the same way that a real life situation would.
Yeah, I think if I was like vetting a partner, I would ask them like, why are you into it? Why are you asking about it? What made you come here? Just to get to know them as a real person,
Mhm.
like not just through the kink, but like, okay, what's your vibe? Like, what's your whole person? Like, what's your sense of character? Because
Yeah.
it's one thing to be vulnerable. Well, it's so funny. I said this yesterday on stream. It's like we move in with people we don't fully trust. We have sex with people we don't fully trust. We do BDSM with people we don't fully trust. And I don't think that's wrong necessarily. I've had so many play partners where like, I don't know what they do in real life, but at the dungeon, they have the best reputation. They're the most skilled people. This is the only time I ever see them. I'm surrounded by people. They respect safe words. They're skilled in like paddling or whips or nipple play or something. So I will say like it's okay to trust people in the right environment. You know what I mean? And that's how I would judge it is like, am I trusting you with all of me? Am I trusting you in the situation? Do I know you're healthy because you have a good reputation? Do I know you're healthy because you respect my boundaries? And then I do like little tests. So a scene that is not as vulnerable, we start off small. We build up to the more intense scenes. You know what I mean? Because people can talk a big game during negotiation, but I want to see them in play with something that's less risky.
Starting small and building up is always good advice for anything, I
Yeah.
think. If you have the opportunity to observe before participating, I think that can be helpful as well. Obviously,
Yes.
not everyone's going to have that option, but if you can observe at a dungeon and be a respectful witness to some play, that can be really insightful as well and help
Yeah.
to reinforce like, oh, I want to be in that situation myself, or you know what, maybe that's not what I thought it was. And I think that's really beneficial.
True. Harmony, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I mostly use my intuition when it comes to that, as well as like the people that I do the most like kinky stuff with, I've known for a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, just again, I just look for that opening pattern or that narrowing pattern when it comes to how
Yeah.
people engage. I think if they're yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I have two thoughts. One, Love and Leashes is the K-drama. So thank you to that commenter.
Love and
Love
Leashes.
and Leashes. It's really good. I think it's on Netflix. Have you
Okay.
seen it? Harmony, did you say something? I didn't hear you.
I love the name.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I know, right? Cute. I love it's so good. So definitely recommend. And then the second thing is I'll just give this short story about I thought a really good top. I met this top at the dungeon and he wanted to play with me. And so we met in a vanilla setting at a bar in Seattle, very commonplace, to have a drink and negotiate. But I am a lightweight and I had a cider. And I was drunk by halfway through my cider, and he went, so we're going to stop negotiation now, and we're going to do this again on a different date when you're sober. And I was like, thank you.
Great.
I felt so embarrassed, but he was so thoughtful. He wasn't mad. He wasn't angry. He wasn't like, you wasted my time. He was like, well, I'm glad you enjoyed your cider, but like now we can't negotiate, right? And I was like, yes. And he ended up becoming one of my most long-term tops, one of my safest tops, one of the greatest people I ever met in Seattle. We're friends to this day. Like one of the most trustworthy people I've ever met in the scene. And I think that first moment of negotiating with him was just such a reassuring thing, right? To stop negotiation and then just to enjoy the time with me anyway. So we giggled, saw Pirates of the Caribbean, and called it a day. Isn't that funny though?
That's so positive. I love that. And like major green flag at that
Major
point.
green flag. No, I know so many people. Oh, major red flag. People who look annoyed or angry, you want to negotiate. People who look like, oh, are you making me do a
Yeah.
checklist? Are you making me get tested? Are you making me
Mhm.
red flag?
Huge
Red.
red flag. Back away quickly.
Yes. Oh, wait. Go ahead, Arena.
Sorry. I was going to say, you mentioned, in negotiations, it's very important to be sober, but in a very trusted relationship, do substances have a place in BDSM or kink?
Great question. Great question.
They
I would-
can, but I think it adds another layer of risk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you got to take those extra precautions too.
Sorry, Harmony. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I would probably do it with an intimate partner, but I don't think that I would do it with clients.
Yeah. I want to. The problem is like when I think of BDSM or kink, I can't think of a scene I could do drunk or high, which wouldn't then lead to more risk than less risk. So I personally think probably not for me. Though I'm kind of into exploring because I had a play partner who did this with their partner. So I'm kind of open to it where they had a negotiated relationship and they were married for a very long time. So they've been partnered they've known each other for like 10 years plus. But like they would like give each other drugs and they wouldn't tell them which one it was. And then the partner would have to like experience that. But the scene itself didn't involve like needles or something. It just involved that level of intimacy. So a part of me is like, could I have a scene that's more sex focused or more like, because I love having sex on drugs, like that's great because you consent sober and then so I'm like maybe I could make it work in that way, but if I think of implements, like girl, I'm not gonna can you imagine me in a flogger and drunk and like it's not gonna work, I'm gonna hit you in the face. So a part of me is thinking, well, when I say a scene or I say BDSM, do I mean implements? Do I mean impact? Do I mean sex? So I think that's how I would go about figuring out if it was safe or not.
I think it's more
I
like substances as BDSM. So like the fact that you are together in this intimate setting, like the scene that you described, that actually sounds so interesting to me. Like I kind of want to try that now.
Yeah.
But that's like that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Also, I think it makes a difference. Are both people intoxicated? Is only one person intoxicated? Because that's going to change the whole dynamic as well.
Yeah, great question. Okay, last question from the audience, and then ladies, if we want to take it in a direction we can, or if we're ready to end it, let me know. But do people use their real identities in the dungeon usually, or is there often an alias used? And I want to talk about this online or in our spaces because the irony is like I have literally had play partners that I don't know their real name. I don't know their vanilla name. I don't know how old they are. I don't know. I just know they're in their 50s and their name is so and so at the dungeon and they have a great reputation. They've been there for 30 years and I trust them to throw a flogger and I trust them to be safe because I asked them right away. I was like, where are your play partners? Where's your history? And they're like, here's 3 numbers. Here are 3 profiles. Here are people in the dungeon who've known me. So I don't need people's real identities. What I need is their real honest truth. And like that could come in a way of an alias. So I always use Brittany at the dungeon because girl, I ain't gonna remember no name. But at the same time, if I had used a name, it would have been just as true of a name or an identity as my legal name, right? So I think dungeon names are real names. I think like that's the glory of it is like you can be anyone in the dungeon and you can identify anyway. So it's up to you how you want to identify in these scenes, right? Even online, identify how you want, but I feel like that's the coolest part is like what is a name? It's the imagery you have associated with the name, right?
Absolutely. So Genevieve is actually my middle name. And I started going by Genevieve when I retired from the corporate world and fully embraced sex work and the BDSM community and all of that. So it is a real name and I don't hide my first name. I mean, it's out there, it's public as well. But that was a shift for me in that Genevieve feels like it fits the identity that I've been embracing. So
Yeah,
it made
I
more
love
sense
that.
to go by that.
I love it. And this is a very personal question. So, of course, if anyone doesn't want to answer, like, please don't feel a need to. But any thoughts?
I use an alias just because I think that's the safest for me doing in-person sex work.
Smart. Yeah, makes sense.
I'm not in the community like that, so that wouldn't apply to the way
Fair.
that I practice.
Fair. Now, here, go ahead, Genevieve.
I'm so sorry. I was going to say, if you were to find yourself, if you were to go to a dungeon just for an experience, do you think you would use your real name or do you think you would want to create like a different name to go by?
I like the idea of aliases, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
I like reserving a part of my brain to like, okay, it's a good compartmentalization, like to use a different name and being like, okay, now I am in this space.
Yeah. I actually, that's Genevieve, that's what I was going to ask. So, we're on the same page there.
We were thinking the same.
Yes, literally. Okay, so now that we're at this point, guys, the conversation's gone so well. People are loving it. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you guys were hoping we would cover today? I'm out of questions. I feel really good, but I have more spoons if anyone has anything else they want to chat about today.
I'm down to chat if there are more questions, but I love the way the conversation has been. I don't have anything I don't feel like there's any unanswered questions for me, but certainly I can hang around if anyone else does.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
I have a question. So I was actually trying to think about how are we defining kink, and what makes me think about stuff like this is I personally have a harder time understanding certain kinks. Now, here's what I mean. There's like the impregnation kink that is practiced by heterosexual couples, and I'm like, okay, so you guys are just trying to make a baby. And then there's like the ovipositor, and I'm like, okay, yes, that is a kink, ovipositors. Or if it's like a same-sex couple and they have like, that reproduction kink or whatever, that I understand. But then there's like a certain, I think maybe vanilla way of operating where I'm like, oh yeah, like semen and vagina is a kink. And I'm like, is it a kink or do you want babies? Like, or do you have like the natural biological drive that is inherent in like the human species that you are now thinking is a kink? Like, have you repressed it so much that now this is kinky to you?
I mean, I think it can move from just being like a side effect of sex, to being actually really, really sexy. I don't want any more kids, but I still find the breeding, kink super hot. I love it, like there's something about the fact that we can come together and create a life that is just maybe, I don't know, maybe it is inherently kinky or sexy, but is that even a kink? I don't know. I think in that case, like when people say things like that, when they say kink, they just mean it turns them on in a special way. You know, I don't think when they say, well, maybe they do, but it seems like that's the way that that word is being used. And I understand that there's some things that are like psychologically kinky that I wouldn't want to do in real life, if that makes sense. Like step sibling porn or something. It's hot, but I don't think about my brother.
I think about like, so to me, it just feels like because we live in a real world and we can't be having all of the babies, but that drive is like to make babies, but then we're aware of that. So we're like, okay, I'm going to take preventative measures, but also this is still hot. So I guess my question is like, because to me, when I think of kink, I almost think of, like there's not crows doing impact play, right? Like that's what I'm. So I'm thinking of things that maybe don't, that we know of, but things that don't fit into like a natural sexuality, right? That's almost what I think of when I think of kink. Whereas like reproduction just feels like literally the most natural thing ever, and so to classify it as a kink is strange to me personally.
I don't know that like every time I've practiced like an impregnation kink or I've explored that, I don't really think about the babies.
Yeah, no, it's not about that.
I'm gonna be real with you. I go way darker. I go more into like slavery, pregnant. Like you're gonna like. I go more into like
objectifying yourself as a baby maker.
Yeah, like kinda. I go a little darker with it, which is just like you can't run away. I'm gonna chain you to the bed and make you like this thing that like produces for me. But it's not about the babies. Sorry, Harmony. Say that again.
Yeah, I was just going on with your thing. I was saying, yeah, I'm just gonna put my baby inside you without any.
Oh my god, girl, please.
Yeah,
it's like that where I'm like, it's like you're being kind of like a little bit of CNC mixed in with it. I think is kind of like what I like about it. But again, for so I'm not really thinking about the kids. Like, no offense, but like,
I also think a lot about like, for me, like the physiological element of it, like literally like the body fluid exchange can be a sexy concept for me, that above and beyond the fact that stands to create a baby, like that you're like mixing your DNA in that way feels sexy, right? Like you're literally like combining your DNA, and separate of whether it creates a baby, like that part can be really sexy as well.
Yeah. Which makes me wonder, like, going. I'm sorry, Harmony, were you going to say something?
Sorry, I'm just talking like a normal conversation. I'm agreeing. Absolutely.
I love that. Arena, are you, because like I just had a thought about your question in relation to like, I have known couples, oh, this is so bad. I don't do this to your partners, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm really into like submissive cleaning the house stuff, like maid stuff, but it's really just an excuse to get your partner to do all the dishes.
That made me think about have you guys heard of like female-led relationships? So it's like a whole community. It's like usually like female dominatrices, but it seems like what I've observed in those communities is it's like lifestyle BDSM, but also, are you just not being a house husband? That's like the parts where I'm like, okay, like when does it become kinky? And it seems like to me they practice things other than just being a stay-at-home house husband. They do like chastity cages, and they do impact play and stuff like that with their female dom. But they also do kind of describe it, I think, as a inherent lifestyle. But to me, then it sounds weird that a relationship where the woman is like head of the household would be considered inherently kinky, if that makes sense. That just seems like a negotiated, like, relationship rather than a kink.
It's the vibe, right? It has to be, for me, it has to be the vibe, right? Ultimately, like sex is sex is sex, but if you add different vibes, elements, layers to it, same with like doing dishes, like, girl, there are days where I'm like just doing the dishes and I'm not thinking about it. And then there are days where I'm doing the dishes, but like a hand is up my pants, like it's different. It's just different vibes.
Yeah. Sometimes you do them because somebody has to do them. And then other times you're like, I really want to do something, I'm in a serve my partner and clean the house and set up, this great environment for them as like an act of, love or whatever it may be. So there can be different intention.
That one, it's intentional. It's like that's what I mean when I say like I want to be very intentional. I want to make it clear I'm not just kissing you because like that's what people do who are in love. Listen to me. I'm going to kiss you right now. I'm going to make it clear that like we are doing something right now. So it's like making it so intentional. It feels like really overwhelming.
Right. This is on purpose. This is not just
Yes.
happening by chance.
I don't want to live, especially BDSM and kink. I think it is so intentional because vanilla life can be so robotic. Like, okay, here's missionary. We've had sex 1.5 times this week, and oh, I've kissed you, and like, oh, whatever. No, I want there to be like intentionality. I want it to feel so overwhelming. I want to look at you in public in a way that, like, to other people, they're just looking at each other, but to you, you know that I'm sending you a message of what I'm going to do to you later. And I want you to know that. Well, everyone else just like, la, 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 la. You know what I mean?
Yes. That's really what I kind of strive to aim for as well. And it's a work in progress, but
Yes.
I really think that
Yeah.
being intentional with your actions is, for me, been super satisfying. And I think that it's helped my relationships immensely.
And it has to be practiced, like you said. It's not something like I think I'm always practicing it, right? Like different vibes, different
Mhm.
appropriate vibes. Sometimes I'm so impulsive about it, and then I'm like, I'm not even being intentional about it, but I know I want it. So sometimes I'm like, think about where you are right now. Like, oh, I'm in Croatia, and they're very like proper. And sometimes I want to go and slap my partner's butt in public, and I'm like, put it down.
Right. Not right now. Don't do that right now.
It's so I did it one time, and he was like, "We are in Croatia," and I was like, "I'm so sorry." A very Catholic country. I'm so sorry.
I actually have another or like potential topic to discuss that I think might also maybe shine a light on the differences between kink and fetish, but also might contradict this thought of the breeding kink that I had. Is have you guys read that Reddit post where this young wife, she's like on kid number 4, and her husband is like, I've always wanted a big family. And he's like constantly trying to keep her pregnant. And then she finds out that he has like a breeding fetish or kink.
Oh no.
And so he's like a pregnancy kink specifically, like he wants her always heavily pregnant. And she finds this out. And this was not safe, sane, consensual. This was like being tricked into, and also bringing real life children into the world to satisfy this man's kink. And then I heard this other story that this midwife was telling where, and she says like this happens all the time, or even like labor and delivery nurses, where they'll have couples, but especially the men are like at the forefront of this, faking pregnancies and then asking nurses or midwives details on how do we check the cervix, how do we do this, what do we do for labor, and they're like fetishizing and also involving unconsenting people in their maybe fetish, maybe kink. But it almost feels to me like sometimes people try to justify like, oh, but it's my kink if someone's unaware. It's my kink to be in public and get caught, and involving like unconsenting people. It's also like the people who like walk around with like a leash to the grocery store, and it's like, all right, do we need to be doing that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So is there any thoughts on that as well?
Plenty, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Where do we
yeah.
start?
Yeah, it's just consent violations to me. Like,
Nobody likes being tricked, like
Yeah.
ever. So that's just a shitty thing to do to somebody.
what about something like this? I've heard of this. Like, I've had a person tell me they go like through the drive-through without wearing any pants.
Oh.
The people who serve them don't even know, but it gives them like the jollies just knowing that they were like half naked in front of these people without them knowing it. Like, is that,
Okay,
what do you guys
I'll be really here. I'll be honest. I'll put myself out that you guys can judge me. In my 20s, I 100% would wear like a vibrator, or a butt plug, or something in public, and like nobody would know. And I would wear underwear and like clothes, and I would go, and my partner knew, and I knew, and like every time he'd have me like sit down. It would be like a thrill for us. And again, I was wearing underwear and bottoms, so it wasn't like I was getting anything anywhere. That was like really important to us, like not to contaminate a stool or something. So we were thinking about it. And then of course we didn't want it to be too loud. And so we got like a really quiet one. And then we were trying to think like, okay, what if there's an emergency and I have to take it out, which by the way happened one time. And then I was thinking, okay, like what's this? And so we tried to be thoughtful while also experimenting with this kink of like public humiliation. Like what if somebody finds out and maybe I should go tell somebody you have it in you and like all of these things. And again, nobody ever found out. We did pretty good, but you know, I feel like that's okay. As long as you do enough due diligence, maybe it could be okay. But if it goes wrong, what do you do then? And that's something that I don't think people think about. Like, what if it goes wrong? What if you have to take it out? Do you have a bathroom you can run to? Like, what do you do? But I have done stuff like that before.
Mhm.
I fully agree. I think that there are elements of public play that are really hot. And that's something that I didn't mention earlier when we were talking about like our specific kinks or whatever. But for sure, that's something that I have explored both. You can obviously toys. There's so many incredible innovations now with like wearable toys that can be controlled,
Mhm.
via apps on your phone. You can sync them to music if you're at the club and like all of those things where I think you can be thoughtful about exploring your public play kink while also being respectful of the other people around you. And part of that thoughtfulness is the what if questions, right? Like, what if something goes wrong? What if it's blah, 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 blah? So plan ahead a little bit, obviously. Try and minimize potential risk. And always, I think it's super important to be aware that it's not appropriate to, in my opinion, it's not appropriate to involve somebody in a way that they're going to be aware of, right? So like when you first
Yeah.
started with the drive-through story, I kind of got the ick because at my store that I work at, I have had male customers expose themselves to me completely inappropriately, unprovoked, uninvited. And they're like, oh, like I just, that's my kink. And I'm like, not okay. Get the fuck out. I'm going to call the
Mhm.
cops, But if it's like you're wearing a trench coat with or I don't know, you're somehow satisfying your kink while not actually exposing me, then I'm okay with that.
I have a few thoughts. So I think about those videos where it's like a girl wearing a skirt and then in public, like she orgasms or something, but it's like very obvious in public. Like, have you seen those videos where like you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then
I
you have to think
don't
about, oh,
I
sorry, go
don't
ahead.
like the
Yeah,
very
yeah.
obvious parts because then you're forcing people to be participating.
Yeah.
So like if you can do it quietly and subtly and discreetly, okay, I guess.
But
Yeah, I
then
feel okay with that.
I think about what are the differences with being thoughtful if your kink is like exhibitionism, which is kind of what we're discussing, but what if it's voyeurism? And is there an ethical way to engage in public voyeurism? And you might not, be aware that this guy is taking, maybe just innocent pictures, but actually he's taking pictures of everyone's feet for later.
Yeah,
It's like how do we navigate that?
Okay, one time I was at Solstice Parade in Seattle. It's a family fun parade, and there's a lot of body art and nudism, and I was topless, and I was like in this whole. I always go as a flower, like floral or something. So I was like all floraled out, and I was sitting with my friends like in a circle. We were standing right, and the guy comes out of nowhere, sticks his cell phone in between all of us, and clicks at my boobs and takes the photo, and all of us were like bro, and we're like, that was so inconsiderate, but he was a foreigner, and a part of me is like, are we having a language barrier, sir? Like, you can't just like, yes, there are pictures, there's people everywhere who are naked, and people are taking pictures, and they're taking pictures of the parade, and like you never know if they're taking pictures of the parade or like the guy with the cock ring on. I don't know, because like everyone came again, but the audacity to come into a physical circle and point it right at my chest and take the photo, and like all of us look we're not fighters, we're lovers over here. So I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, I don't know if should I hit you? We didn't do anything. We just kind of went like, bro, not cool. Not cool. But he couldn't even respond in English. So we didn't know what to do with the situation. Like, in that way, I feel like boundaries, consent, understanding the vibe. Some people don't understand, like, not all nudity is sexual. So, like, super inappropriate,
Right. That feels like a misunderstanding by the way that I'm hearing that story. I don't feel that he was intentionally trying to be inappropriate, but it still was inappropriate for the situation.
If you took it at a distance, I don't think I would have cared. But it was coming into the circle, breaching.
The proximity.
Yeah, the proximity was like so weird to me. I didn't like that. Like, at all. And I will say, like, in my youth, just to like put myself again on the burner here, because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, before I really formed my values, especially around consent, I knew there was this place in Seattle that some kinksters would go, and it was kind of foresty, and people would do scenes up on the trees and stuff, but it was actually adjacent to like a family park and adjacent to a family beach and adjacent to a family. And I will say that sometimes I did engage in like really selfish and risky behavior of like, I just want it right now and I don't even care if we get caught. And I will say that is like probably the most icky time of my life in terms of this behavior, because I'm not proud of it and I think it was really bad. But it was one of those things where I'm like, what was I thinking? And honestly, I was so inconsiderate. And I think this is the key here. If you're going to be considerate of the community, considerate of people walking in on you, thoughtful about other people, you will take a moment before you take an action. And I will say some of the biggest mistakes I've ever made, I've just been so inconsiderate of myself or the people around me. And so I want to tell people, like, this is like a learning thing. You don't know what mistakes you're going to make, but you might make some mistakes that like are so icky to you. But then remember, like, what were you doing in that moment? You were probably not thinking about anyone else but yourself in that moment. And so I think so much of kink consent is revolving around other people. So I think you can do public stuff if you are being truly considerate and thinking of many of the risks, if not all of them, before engaging in certain behavior.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yes, you've got to be very, very intentional again with it, right? And give some forethought.
Yeah.
With that in mind, again, like, it can be fun and it can be something that it is something a lot of people enjoy, but we have to practice responsibly.
And it's something that a lot of non-kinky people do too, right? Like, we have this cultural understandings of teenagers going to a movie theater and experimenting in the back and all of that, which, again, like, when you bring up, Brittany, like your stuff that you did in your 20s, I want to be more lenient of that in a sense. Like, if I think about like, a teenager, practicing voyeurism in public or whatever, again, like, I want to be more understanding of that. But when I hear of adults doing voyeurism in public, like, you're a 40-year-old and you're like peeking into people's windows, or you're, and you think that, oh, well, they won't know, so it won't matter. But I do still think that at its core, it's very inconsiderate.
Okay, what about this? I was at a conference one time for work. And one of the guys and I who were participating in the conference or whatever, we were like going to the elevator, like, and the hotel was kind of like a courtyard. So all the hotel rooms were like in a circle, and you can kind of imagine where the stories may be going, but someone's window was open and they were going at it like bunnies. And I stopped and I was watching, because I'm a lot of a voyeur, and I was watching and I was like, yeah, this is for us, right? Like, the blinds are open. We all know we can see each other. Like, they're fucking for us, right? And he was like, I don't know. Should we be watching this? I was like, there's no way they don't know. Like, this is too stupid not to know what's going on. Like, you could look, like, you could see inside. It's too stupid. Like, they can't. This is for us. I'm allowed to watch this.
They know. Yeah.
They have to know. And he felt bad watching. Well, I felt like there's no way they could do this on accident. But then I was like, wait, could they have done this on accident? I mean, guys, like, it was like a courtyard. So if they looked out their window, they would see other people's windows. That's why everyone's window was closed. So, like, was that appropriate to watch? Or, like, should I have also been afraid to watch?
Was it appropriate for them to have their windows open?
Thank you. I felt like, okay, like, they're involving everybody else in their kink.
If they're going to have their windows open, then I feel like it's free business. You can
That's what I
watch,
felt
like, for example, I once had sex on a balcony at, like, a fifth floor apartment building in, like, an urban area. I knew there was a chance that there probably were quite a few people who could see it, and that was their right. If they, and again, I was young, and maybe I would reconsider some of the risk there potentially,
Sure.
but I do also feel confident that it wasn't in any kind of like there were no children around. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
4 in the morning in like a urban downtown
Yeah.
type environment. So
No,
like it felt like it was fairly risk minimized. But yeah, at that point, like I'm putting on a show at this point, y'all. You can watch if you want, and I'm sorry if I'm offending you. That's really
yeah.
I should have been maybe a bit more considerate in that regard.
What if
But
even walking in your own home? I have windows everywhere. We live on the 8th floor. We're high up. Like, I don't have any buildings that are as tall as my building around me in which they could see into my apartment. But technically, we tested it. If you go to certain parts of the neighborhood at night, if the lights are on, you can see into the apartment. But like, I'm a nudist. I walk around nude like most of the
Mhm.
time. I'm just walking around topless. I'm not thinking about it. But then I was like, okay, who do I need to be considerate of, even at this height of a building? Like, again, my window is facing the ocean, so I have no neighbors at this height facing my direct window. So I'm like, okay, who am I being considerate of? Am I supposed to be so stressed? Like, think about the irony of this is I swear vanillas are not thinking about this shit. They are not thinking about it like as much as I am trying to be like, what do I do in this situation? Can I act natural in my own home, or should I be cautious about acting natural in my own home? So I would even take it outside of kink and ask, at what point is like you're just living,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, sometimes you're literally just living your life and people are going to get enjoyment from watching that, or people are going to be irritated from watching that or feel
Yeah.
offended by watching it. And I can't live my life based on what other people are going to think of their observations of me.
Mhm.
But I do want to avoid intentionally upsetting someone if possible.
Of course.
I
I
think
keep
about
the curtains
oh,
closed on one side of my house because there
Oh,
is like a potential that people could see me there, but I also am a nudist and want to walk around naked. So
yeah.
the windows on the other sides totally open.
Mhm.
I think that in a sense it's about the concept of choosing your struggle, right? Like there's this idea of like you can't complain if you're living in a large apartment building that maybe there's kids kind of being loud sometimes, right? Like
Mhm.
you should be aware that by whether it's a choice or like your life circumstance that has led to you needing to live in a space like this, you now are sharing a space with other people versus if you have like a single family home with like a private backyard and nobody can see into it, like by all means be naked, do whatever you want in your own private area, right? And so it's really like just knowing and evaluating your environment, to what extent you should be considerate of the public within your home, because in some cases the public is literally like, these are your windows and you're looking into each other's windows, so
Yeah.
maybe you use curtains or something like that.
Yeah, the circumstance
Nope.
makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah, I like close the blinds and use bobby pins to make sure that they stay closed.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
not taking any chances.
Met people, yeah. But I like
But
showing
yeah,
off.
if you
Wait, say that again, Harmony?
Oh, I said I like showing off online though. Like I
Mm,
am a bit of an exhibitionist, but I do not want people that I don't consent to seeing see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There is a part of me that now that especially now that I'm older, right? Like I think it's been like a good 10 years since I've done anything that I thought was like inappropriate in that way. Like it's been a long time. Now I get kind of like a deep ick about like if I'm trying to be sexy and cute and someone's like, ew, I didn't want to see that. I'm like, oh no, oh my God. Like I'm so ashamed. Like I'm so sorry. Cause like I just want to be so aware. And it's hard because in Seattle, where it was kind of more like body positive, nude friendly, there were circumstances. I remember one time there was a guy who was naked walking around with a sword, as one does. And he came up to my group and I was like, "What's up, bro?" And he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And we talked and was like friendly. He walked away. This woman came up to me and she was like, "Hey, that guy's like naked walking around with a sword." I was like, "Which one's more threatening?" And she goes, "Both, kind of." And I was like, "Okay." In Seattle, like he's allowed to be naked, kind of like New York, right? Like people, like it's kind of nude friendly, but also his sword would be concerning if he wasn't also in the what's this LARPing community.
You're talking about a real sword then?
Yeah, like yeah, it's two kinds of swords. We're propped up, and so it was one of those things where I could understand her concern. I was like, "Are you from here?" She goes, "No, I'm visiting from out of state," and I was like, "That makes sense to me. This must be super weird." Because even for me, for a second, I was like, "The sword." I was more concerned about the sword than the penis. Okay. I was literally concerned about the sword. And then I was like, oh, what community are you in? He was telling me. And I was like, okay, there's a LARPing community. So I got it. And it's one of those things where I love the idea of living in a community where people are just naked. Or like I professionally nannied and I was at Solstice and I was naked. And when my nanny families, the kids saw me and went, Brittany. And I turned around and I was like, oh, God. And so like, the wife didn't know what to do. And she like covered her husband's eyes because she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm your employer. Your employer. She didn't know what to do.
What is the etiquette?
What is the etiquette? And again, they're the family who go to Solstice, so they're not anti-nudity. They just didn't know what to do in the context of seeing their nanny naked. And I was like, great question. I don't know what to do here. So again, it's like I've been bubble hopping for so long, and I'm in this bubble where like families are around nude people, but it's not sexual. So it's like, what does consent even mean? It's it gives a great opportunity to. Can we create certain environments where we're allowed to, in certain contexts, be a certain way? And I think that's really the question we're asking, right?
Yeah.
I think like nudity can be non-sexual, but I think when it comes to anything that is sex, because like, we're on the beach, our feetsies are out,
Yeah.
and some pervert can make that pervy, right?
True.
So yeah,
Mhm.
so it's really about the sexuality aspect of it, I think, more than the nudity aspect of it. Like I'm very pro destigmatizing nudity in public, and like, just a body's a body, and I think that can really create a positive relationship for people with their own bodies and with other people's bodies. So I think that's probably the distinction. But I was actually going to ask you, have you thought about what you would do if you saw your nanny naked with your family? Like, have you figured out what the
Like
what
switch
the
the
move is?
roles. Yeah, I think there would be a level of inappropriateness because they're an employee. Like I think I really understand that perspective a lot more because of the like professionalism. Like that stereotype of like the dads are gonna fuck the nannies. The last thing I wanted to do as a nanny is like break up a family or even lead either party on, male, female, non-binary. Like I never wanted to ever insert myself because I actually nannied for some queer or poly families. And like technically that's an option and people do have stories about getting with the nanny, but I just did not want to cross boundaries with my professionalism. So I think there's something like that where what do you do when you see your boss in public? And you're not at the office. I think that's a question we all have to face as employees is like, what would I do? And I think there's that element that I do understand and respect.
I can relate to that because when I was working in my corporate job, I had several hundred direct reports that I was their boss. And at work, I would be very professional. I wouldn't talk about any adult things that wouldn't have been appropriate. However, we lived in a city where, by chance, me and some employees, unbeknownst to us, ended up at a kink event, all at the same kink event in, our garb and whatnot. And I didn't see them until several hours into the event. I'm not sure at what point they saw me and or recognized me. And it was a bit awkward. It was definitely a bit awkward. And we said hello to each other at the event when we did actually like see each other. And kind of joked about how, I wasn't expecting to see you here, sort of a situation. And then we all went back to work and never really spoke of it. But I will say that was kind of a turning point for me where I was like, you know what, I don't want to be in a career where I have to hide parts of myself. So for me, that was kind of like a light bulb where I'm like, why am I out in my free time doing something that I enjoy, surrounded by other consenting individuals, and yet I feel like I just was caught, and I didn't like that feeling. The profession, like the work line, makes things complicated.
Yeah. At the dungeon I used to go to in Seattle, they would do you had to go to an orientation before you could come play. Just so we go over rules if you're new, if you're completely new. It also, gosh, I won't lie to you. It was so comforting as a newbie who just like didn't know how to answer. Cause like I went to the dungeons by myself and I was from San Diego and learned there. But when I went to Seattle, I was like by myself going to a dungeon as like a single person because I didn't have any friends to go with. And it was so nice. They're like, this is an orientation and we're going to tell you what to do. And one of the things they said is if you do see someone from your vanilla life, it's okay to like not acknowledge each other. You don't have to. You can do it from far away, maybe give each other like a little nod, like can I approach, or maybe get yourselves in a small corner and be like, what do we do? What do you want to talk? How do you want to do this? Or it's also okay to come to the dungeon and be someone totally different today. You don't have to be the person who has that job. It was just like a good thing to cover because I never thought about it. I never thought about, even at Solstice, I just never, totally just did not expect to run into one of my kids. Like didn't, just like never. And then there it was. And I was like, okay. So it was nice that like there were people who had already had this happen so many times. They're like, let's make a rule or / a comforting orientation for people to know, like, this stuff's going to happen to you. What are you going to do about it? And that's why I asked you guys the question earlier. Like, do we or should we think differently of these people? Like, it's like kind of seeing your kindergarten teacher at like a dungeon party and she's like being railed by 3 people and like blood sports are everywhere. It's like, what do I do? Should I treat her differently? Can she teach my kid? Like, can she, do you think differently of people when you see them in a position you never thought you'd see them in?
I think I do think differently of them, but maybe not necessarily negatively. I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, more information
Mhm.
about this person. And I think, ideally, I would like to live in a bubble where that's not a big deal, but I also can see and understand why certain bubbles would really have a problem, with a
Yeah.
teacher,
Yeah.
Being part of the lifestyle. So
In
Yeah.
the sex worker community, as I've kind of moved into that direction, there is kind of an understanding that if you see someone that you recognize from the industry out and about in the public, that we, out of respect, you don't acknowledge that you guys have any kind of previous relationship. So having that understanding now, I think has been helpful. Like, oh, okay, like it's not rude if I don't acknowledge you. That's actually more polite because we're being respectful of each other.
Yeah. God, don't you love how these alternative communities are so like consent and like it's so there. I swear, like every time you guys like the more we're talking, I'm just like, oh, we're so much better.
But yeah,
I was
before I knew
oh,
of, I would have
sorry.
thought like I have to say hello to this person,
Yes. Yeah.
and you don't.
it's rude not to, right? Yeah.
I was going to say it's interesting how, at least in the US, I don't know how it is in other bubbles, but other adult activities such as going out drinking is like a thing you can do with your coworkers. So being intoxicated with coworkers, okie dokie. Being nude with coworkers, let's call HR. It's very, it's and then I guess like the distinguishing thing is that nudity and BDSM and kink is associated with sexuality, and like to what extent does sexuality have a place in the workplace? We have decided it doesn't. There's that conversation, and yet at the same time we are mammals. We have a sexuality, and so it's gonna be, I think, a thing at some point or later. I also even think like festivals and stuff, like it's not weird, at least in my bubble, to talk about, oh, I'm going to a festival, and then your boss is like, I'm also going to that festival or whatever. But then you're also like, oh shit, I'm gonna be wearing like the skimpiest like outfit. I'm gonna have my little sparkly pasties on. Like, I don't know if I want to run into my boss, but it's also cool that we're at the same festival.
Especially if those festivals
Yeah.
are like drug related festivals. I always wonder about that. Like, what if you're going to a festival that's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Or even if you say like I'm going to Burning Man, like that's an association with a kind of person, like a type of person. And so it's like, how much should I say? Like, am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to have this conversation? And I think this is just like the reality of navigating different people with different cultures with different expectations of you. But I know as a nanny, I was always hesitant to share these things, and I always let my families kind of guide me with where their comfort level was first. And then I would only volunteer if I felt like they were a safe space. Like I said, I nannied for like poly families, so I could be like, oh, I'm poly. But those same poly families were like, don't worry, we're not BDSMers. And I was like, and then that's the question, like, did they deserve to know that I was one? But like, I didn't think so. Like, my nannying wasn't impacted by the fact that I was one. You know what I mean? And I didn't get the impression that they needed to know that. But there, when it comes to employment, it's like, how much do people need to know? But then, yeah, it's like somebody said in the comments, like, it's like running into your therapist in public. Like,
I think it depends on industry too, right? Like it might be weirder to like be a kindergarten teacher and then see like a parent at like a Coachella or whatever and be like, oh, okay. versus if you're like in engineering or like biotech or something like that, that tends to be like there's no children involved whatsoever in that line of work. And
Mm.
so people can tend to be a bit more open about substances and things they do for fun, but still not really sexuality, I've noticed, unless you've built that relationship with your coworkers like separately.
Wait.
Yeah, sexuality is always seems to be the final hurdle there, right? Like that's the one thing that is kept sort of separate from other adult activities that could be arguably more appropriate to be sharing with coworkers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, like I think there's been a couple times now in the news, like teachers getting fired when it's been found out that they have OnlyFans.
Mm-hmm.
Versus
Yeah.
not like even any kind of like approaching the two crossing at all. Which
But
is,
it's also like
Right.
you're seeking it out. Like you're seeking it out, you know? Like there's not like
Mhm.
if you are somebody that's looking for porn of any kind, there you go. You can't like point. I think the quote is like pointing with one hand and jacking off with the other. Like, don't be doing that.
Nobody
Yeah.
likes that.
Well,
Okay.
I think it comes from people not having a relationship with their own sexuality, like a very deep introspective relationship with their own sexuality.
And a
Yeah.
lot of shame around that as well.
Yep.
Harmony, you took that's what I was thinking of. I was like, where did that thought go? I had it. And like, that's what I was worried about is like when you find out something about someone, because like I have family in the teaching industry, like the education, bubble, and they were told upon hiring, like, go to your Facebook and take down every photo of you drinking, every photo of you at a barbecue where you have a beer in your hand. And my relatives were like, even a beer, bro? Like, what, you think my students don't know I have a beer during like football season? And it was such a weird idea of like, what is the message we're sending to our communities where we're like, people aren't real outside of their jobs, or people don't have lives outside of their jobs, or people are one dimensional. And I understand it to an extent. Like, I will say, living in Croatia where no one speaks English and no one can like get to know me in a real way, it's kind of nice that I'm just known as a good customer. There's something really freeing about being anonymous, except as a good participant in the community. But at the same time, when you want to integrate yourself into that community, it's nice to be seen for like who you are to some extent. And so it's hard to know that balance, I guess, or it's hard for me to always decide like who gets more of me, who gets to have more of a conversation with me. Or like if my friends go, "Oh, she's on OF." Like so many people are under the illusion that OF is my primary job when like YouTube is literally my primary job. It's where I make the most money. It's where I've dedicated most of my time. And I love my OF community. They're so great. Just posted a really great Halloween themed photo today, guys. I'm really proud of it.
Yay.
But it's like one of those things where it's not my primary job. It's not my primary income. It is my part-time work and I love it. But it's interesting how people, when they see you, they go, "Oh, OnlyFans content creator and only that." Like one conservative guy reviewed my work and he's like, "OF porn star, like says this about conservative girl." And I was like, okay, first of all, thank you for calling me a star. And second of
Yeah.
all, okay. And also, like, I'm a YouTuber. Like, I am literally like a YouTuber, but they want to judge you through their lens of how they perceive your lifestyle and then paint it in such a bad picture. Or like, you're the borderline girl, you're this girl, you're this thing, you're the BDSM girl. And like, I love it when Abba calls me and he's like, "Hey, I want to know more about BDSM and I'm open and curious and I want to be educated." But I don't like it when people are like, "Oh, you're like that BDSM girl, right?" And I'm like, "Oh,
Right.
bro."
Because it's coming from a different place too, versus like, hey, you're somebody who I respect and I value your insight of on this subject
Yes.
versus, oh, you're that person who's affiliated with something that I'm really judgmental of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I understand that as an in-person sex worker very much.
Yeah, and I know with you guys, sex workers will even judge you for being an in-person
Mhm.
sex. Like, isn't that
Yeah.
insane?
Or yeah.
There is so much discourse within the community about like, if you are an online sex worker exclusively, are you still a sex worker? And like,
Yeah.
just, I don't know. I feel like, why are we fighting each other?
Yeah. Exactly.
I do think
Yeah.
about like I really like the idea of minding your own damn business, but then I think about if someone is nannying your children, if someone is teaching your children, would you not want to do a little snoopy snoop? Would you not want to like figure out like what this person is about, or would you trust the systems, the schools to do their due diligence? But obviously, there's been cases where schools haven't done that. where teachers don't have the credentials that they claim they have, and
Yeah.
schools just bypass that in the background check. So on one hand, I am not against teachers doing OF or doing what they do. Like, are we against teachers like waiting tables now, like doing what they got to do, you know?
Yeah.
So but I also think about, like, okay, as a parent, I'd probably want to know as much as I can about the people that I'm entrusting my children to.
Okay, the only thing I want to know is if they have a foot fetish and if they're on Wiki Feet or whatever it's called, and if they are like DMing people unconsensually on FetLife. That's what I would want to know. But otherwise, like, I can't imagine my part of me is like, just do your damn job and we don't have a problem.
I mean, I might want
But
to
it
know
feels like
a scat fetish or something if they're like watching my young children, you know, I don't know, something like, but maybe that's my small mind. But I probably would have some questions, not because I don't want to be open-minded, just out of safety for my child, you know, like I'd want to double check and make
Ooh.
sure, what kind of kink person are you?
Wait, yeah, because I think it's not that, because it's not like BDSMers can be predators. So I think what I would do is like, how responsible are you with your relationship with this thing that I also do? And are you because I meet BDSMers all the time and I'm like, oh, we do not do it the same. No judgment,
Yeah.
but like, I'm gay judging. Like, I'm not involved in this.
yeah,
So I will,
right.
yeah, something like that.
Same- Yeah. mhm.
I think it comes back to we talked before about like how do you know if you're going to be going to a safe space or interacting with people who hopefully how can you find out if those are would be safe potential partners? You know, you want to get some references, maybe you want to ask about their past experiences, and I think that that's so important. The same if you're looking to hire somebody into your house to provide a specific service, you know, nanny, whatever. Those are also the same steps that I would encourage people to take. Get some references, find out how people who have worked with them in the past feel. And if you notice red flags at that point, then you can kind of proceed accordingly.
Somebody in my comments is saying that they're a therapist, and in their area, they're seeing difficulties with sex workers who are also therapists. Right? Like, should they have to lose their license? Does it matter? What do you guys think? Like, that's where like in Brittany Ideal Bubble world, where I have a community, I'm like, we are adults enough to separate our different jobs. And like, I want to live in that world. But like, that is such a, like, people fall in love with and fuck their therapist all the time. And I am shook. I'm like,
Right.
bro, boundaries, bro.
And the
Mhm.
therapist should be holding those boundaries.
Literally.
That's- Be
You
holding
have
the-
like an increased amount of responsibility now, like exponentially increased. You now have you have to be so cautious that you're being ethical and you're really clear in your boundary setting and all of that.
But at the same time, female sex workers, there is a huge need for therapists who are like aware of sex work and like
Yeah.
okay with
And
it.
there is a big demand for
Kids, you know?
sexual, like I can't think of the exact word, but there is a demand for people who can provide like sexual therapy simultaneously.
Yeah.
So like obviously
Yeah.
it can be done in an ethical way, but it just takes a lot of forethought again.
The question is, do we trust people to do what's good for them? And I think that's a really hard question to answer, whether it's kink or
Mhm.
therapy or online streaming or whatever else. It's like, yes and no. I trust myself to do what I think is best in the moment, and I think that's good enough.
Yeah, that's got to be.
Right?
Because
It's like I
like
can't predict the future.
I- made that were like a huge part of me learning my boundaries and learning,
Mhm.
yeah, I had to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So a hard question for me.
I think in regards to like working with children while doing sex work or some adult work, is do they have like a different name that they're using under, you know, so that if the child Googles their teacher's name, that work doesn't come up. I mean, of course, there's going to be assholes on the internet who try to dox you, but are you aware of that? Do you,
Mhm.
you know, pay for services that help remove doxing information offline so that that doesn't happen? I think like if that was the case, then I'd be like, okay, this is a person that is safe because they are very much compartmentalizing their like, you know, day job and, you know, their night job, or however the terminology
Mhm.
goes, their online work versus their offline work. So I think that's important. Is going back to the dungeon question is actually, I think, having an alias and being very protective of your profession or like civilian job and civilian identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
you exist in a vanilla world, then absolutely, it's very important that you are responsible about how you separate the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was in LA at the Sanctuary, which I believe is shut down now after a billion years of it being opened. It could have relocated, but I was there and I remember I was mentoring this girl and I brought her to a dungeon experience so she could meet other people. And there was a woman there who was a therapist, who was a BDSMer, who was a mentor, was a volunteer at the dungeon. And she said one of the things that she ran into was people who would want to do scenes with her and turn it into therapy. And so it's really difficult once people know your profession not to also primarily see you that way. Even the doctors, I've had play partners who were surgeons, and it was so hard for people not to seek them out because they had specific skill sets. And then the surgeon was like, yeah, but I don't want to do surgery at the dungeon. Like, I don't come, I already do that at
Right.
work all day. Like, I don't take I didn't become a surgeon because of my kink, right? Like, I became,
Right.
they're separate. So I will say, like, the humans are going to human no matter where we're at. And even the most like
Mhm.
self-aware people will have moments of failing to consider other people. And so sometimes I think when we're doing any of this work is like we don't consider ourselves. It's hard to play this game. Like, look, I don't want to live in a world where now that I've been naked on the internet, it could stop me from having certain jobs, or like the fact that I have borderline could inhibit me from adopting in certain states. Like, I don't know what to tell people, but even like the fact that I have PTSD could be a reason that to adopt a child out to me, which is like, I get it, fair, right? To some extent, maybe we shouldn't be adopting children out to the mentally ill, but like at the same time, like who better than the mentally ill who have figured out their shit, because like these kids are gonna have problems, you know what I mean? And so like who
Mhm.
better to help them than people that are like, I love you, I'm neurodivergent too, I love you, I'm mentally ill too, I love you, I know what therapy is, I love you, I have these skills, I love you. Like who better?
Mhm.
So it's like who is better? And at the end of the day, it's the individual with the right skill set and the right balance with like these two things that they're juggling, because it is difficult. Like it must be so hard to juggle these things. Like I even have, like I said, family in the education sphere, and like they're always like, should I do online content creation? And I'm like, not if you want to risk your job. And it's true. How many doctors or surgeons have inappropriately used their TikToks in their practice and now gotten fired or their licenses gotten taken away? Which good on them, like for getting it taken away because they were like TikToking during surgery, which I don't even know what that's about. But again, it's like, okay, is there a responsible adult? Or are we only seeing the dummies who literally like misuse their power in these situations? It's like there's got to be somebody who's doing it right. I know there is. Like there's got to be someone who's doing it right. And do those people deserve to have a space in the world doing it right?
I think that whenever possible, if we can recognize, congratulate, celebrate people who are doing it right, because more often than not, we tend to focus, just as a generalization, we focus on people who are doing things wrong. We focus on experiences that went badly, right? We're going to leave a Yelp review when the restaurant experience was disappointing, but we might not leave it if it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that we can try and be aware of and try and change the way that we do encourage and recognize good behavior when we see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts, ladies? We're coming to an end here. We've been here almost 3 hours, which I think is amazing. I think I'm feeling pretty good about what we've done so far. I'm like mostly
Yeah.
doing a spoon check-in. It's like almost midnight my time, so I'm starting to feel a little bit tired on my end.
Go to bed, girl. Go,
Go
to
to bed.
bed.
Okay. Let's go ahead and end
Thursday.
this thing. Okay, great.
Let's
Then
put it.
before we officially end, though, I'm just going to throw it back to you, girls, so you can just like promote yourselves one last time so people know where they can find you. Madam Genevieve, starting with you.
Yes, Madam Genevieve on multiple different platforms, but Twitter is the best hub that has my link tree and connections to all of my others. I will have it, I believe it's already been linked on my YouTube to this. I think I got a notification. So please check out my content, and I will be streaming more on twitch.tv/Madam Genevieve in the weeks to come as well.
Okay, great. Harmony?
You can find more about me on Twitter. That's where I'm mainly at these days. And possibly look for me in the coming months to be streaming on
Yay.
the favorite.
Yay. Arena?
You can find me on YouTube at Arena Nana. and on Instagram at monoshock.jaan, as well as on TikTok.
And don't worry, I will link everything social media wise at the pinned comment for this video. So I'll do that right after we're done streaming, so everyone can just find everyone conveniently. Thank you guys for being here. I really do appreciate it. You guys are the first participants in my very first panel. So thank you so much for being here. Yay.
This was so fun. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and I want to
Thank you
do
for
more in the
having us.
future, so
We'll
All right.
talk
Yeah.
soon, guys.
yes,
Yeah.
we will. Okay, guys, see you guys soon.
Bye.
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 All right, stream, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. You guys have just been so great sitting through all of this. I just appreciate it so much. Let me know how you guys like that. I want to do future panels. I want to have conversations. I want to have open discourse. And I definitely want to have just like good conversations. Thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye.